Good afternoon and welcome to the February 16th, 2022 City Council meeting. We acknowledge we are on traditional lands of Treaty 4 territory, a treaty signed with 35 First Nations across southern Saskatchewan and parts of Alberta and Manitoba. The original lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. To ensure social distancing measures are being met during this time, some members of council and city administration are attending the meeting today through video conferencing. I'd like to remind those members who are attending of the following. Please ensure your video camera and microphone are turned off. If you wish to speak, council, please use the raised hand function, and when speaking, unmute your microphone as well as enable your camera. All votes will be conducted with a recorded vote. Can I have someone move a motion to approve the agenda at the call of the chair?
Bresciani.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. A seconder?
Hawkins.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. I'll call the question. Any opposed? Carried. Can I have someone move a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the City Council meetings held on February 2nd and February 7th, 2022?
Statichuk.
Thank you, Councillor Statichuk. And a seconder?
Bresciani.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Any error or omissions? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Carried. Council, due to delegation timing, we are actually going to go to item CR 22. I apologize. We're going to the bylaws first. Why don't I just leave this alone? Thank you, both clerk and deputy clerk. We'll consider the public notice 2022-7, the Rapid Housing Initiative Saskatchewan Housing Corporation borrowing repeal bylaw 2022. I'll turn it over to Deputy Mayor LeBlanc to do the first reading of the bylaw.
Thank you. I move, seconded by Councillor Stevens, that bylaw 2022-7 be introduced and read a first time.
I'll ask the clerk to call the vote.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the vote results are in. The motion carries 10-1. Those councillors that are in favor are Councillors Hawkins, Bresciani, Findura, Statichuk, Stevens, LeBlanc, Zakidniak, Mancinelli, Mole, and Mayor Masters. And the councillor that voted against is Councillor Shaw.
Thank you to the clerk. Deputy Mayor LeBlanc, could you please do the second reading of the bylaw?
I move, seconded by Councillor Bresciani, that bylaw 2022-7 be read a second time.
Do any members of council have any questions? Hearing none, I'll ask the clerk to start the vote.
Through you, Mayor Masters, second reading is carried with 10 voting in favor, 1 voting against. The following councillors voting in favor are Councillor Hawkins, Councillor Bresciani, Councillor Findura, Councillor Statichuk, Councillor Stevens, Councillor LeBlanc, Councillor Zakidniak, Councillor Mancinelli, Councillor Mole, and Mayor Masters, and voting against is Councillor Shaw.
Thank you very much, City Clerk. Deputy Mayor LeBlanc, could you please do the consent for third reading for the bylaw?
I move, seconded by Councillor Findura, that council hereby consents to bylaw 2022-7 going to third reading at this meeting.
I'll ask the clerk to start the vote.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the consent for third reading required a unanimous vote. The vote result did not receive a unanimous vote, with 10 members voting in favor and 1 voting against. The one member that voted against is Councillor Shaw. So this bylaw will have to be carried forward to the March 2nd meeting for the final third reading.
Thank you very much, City Clerk. Council, I'll turn your attention to CR 22-7, the concept plan amendment and zoning bylaw for 1462 North Courtney Street. We have a delegation on the call, just waiting for them. I'd like to call upon delegation Jason Petrunia, Rich Threlfall, Dan Tober for Troika Management Corp, Regina, Saskatchewan. Please introduce yourself for the record, where you're calling from, the organization you're representing, if any. You'll have 5 minutes to address City Council, after which time you will have the opportunity to respond to any questions that Council may have for you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please
Dan, do
proceed.
you want to start?
Yep.
Please proceed, Jason.
Okay. Your Worship, Councillor, City Staff, my name is Jason Petrunia. I am a professional planner here on behalf of Troika Management Corp. I'm calling in from Toronto. I'm joined today by Dan Tauber, who is a representative of Troika Management Corp., and he is calling in from Kelowna, BC. And Rich Threlfall is calling in from Kelowna, BC as well. He is the president of Troika Management Corp. Your Worship, councillors and staff, today we're really here to discuss the proposed concept plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 1462 North Courtney Street. And we're seeking council direction towards ultimately the approval of a concept plan and zoning bylaw amendment to permit a mixed-use development comprising local services, local amenities, office, retail, and a fuel and/or charging station. We are in part today to clarify the application and the report to council on what Troika has heard from stakeholders. Typically, with this kind of amendment, we would have done an open house with the community so that questions could be raised and answered and modifications made to the proposal based on stakeholder input. But with the limitations of the pandemic, consultation has changed, and instead we rely more on one-way information exchanges such as mailouts and then door-to-door conversations when we can facilitate those. So since the process has started, Troika has returned to the community several times to clarify its proposal, and Troika believes that it is nearing a common understanding of what the community would like to see in the proposed location. The key concern, as you may be aware, that has been raised by the community is with respect to density. The community doesn't want to see high-rise development on that location. Moreover, in hearing from a resident that backs onto Courtney, a local commercial development is preferable to residential. So we see this as an opportunity to strike the right balance with the community and add some essential local services to existing and future residents that are living within the Rosewood neighborhood. So let us recall for a moment, please, that the Rosewood concept plan was partly modeled on the successful cathedral neighborhood of Regina. The vision for Rosewood is to be a social hub that will integrate access to attainable housing for families, seniors, and new immigrants, provide access to transit, recreation, and education facilities, and provide access to services and community-based amenities, which would allow residents to age in place and ensure the transformation of the Rosewood neighborhood to a complete community. And as you see in Rosewood today, that transformation is well underway, as demonstrated by the joint use school, field and playground, daycare, attainable rental housing, family housing, and public realm amenities. But what we don't have in the community yet, and what is needed in the community, is access to local amenities, local services. We would suggest that the emerging social hub along Mapleford Drive is evolving into both a neighborhood hub and a focal area. To suggest some future location will have more neighborhood amenities is simply ignoring what has transpired on the ground. Furthermore, Mapleford Boulevard at Courtney Drive is the only gateway to the neighborhood, and as such is the most strategic roadway intersection in Coopertown. We also see this as a preferred location to provide local amenities, such as a local hardware store, Kumon classroom, dentist office, or other retail amenities that offer walkable options to existing residents. And you can see some of the discussion in the slides that join our presentation today. We know that building a complete community requires an ability to accommodate change over time, where a community can respond to different needs as the neighborhood evolves. Due to the unique servicing needs of Rosewood, residents will be waiting 10 to 15 years before commercial amenities can be offered within the currently approved flex zones. Now think for a moment about 10 to 15 years of vehicle trips generated just to access local services. This is a large and significant number. And all those trips contain inherent health and safety risks. We know that walkable communities are healthier, more sustainable, and ultimately safer than car-oriented communities. And we want to keep working on making Rosewood a model of a complete community. We have illustrated in the slides the transportation plans for the neighborhood that identify key aspects of pedestrian flow within the community, including the multi-use pathway, which is located along the south side of Mapleford Drive. We have also included the original vision for Rosewood, for which a pedestrian connection is proposed mid-block south of Mapleford. It remains our opinion that this is the best way to orientate pedestrian traffic through Rosewood. We further identify urban design precedents for the site that will deter direct interaction between retail uses and the street. Lastly, we indicate actual walking distances between the school and the site. And you'll see in that slide that those distances are upwards of 360 meters if a pedestrian were to follow the sidewalk along the controlled intersection. So either at the four-way stop to the west of the school or at the signalized intersection. In summary, through this rezoning, we are not asking for or expecting more density or allowance for high rise or high density. That is not our intent, nor do we want to build that on the site. We are only looking for a zone that allowed for a fuel or charging station. We are quite comfortable to have an appropriate restriction in height registered on title as a caveat to ensure the concerns of the neighborhood residents regarding building height are eliminated. We therefore seek your conditional approval of this proposed rezoning to allow for local commercial and a fuel charging station use. Alternatively, we understand that this could be achieved through a contract zone or similar, or we are willing to continue to work with administration, residents, and the school board to see this happen. We look forward to hearing from you and understanding council's direction on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Petrunia. I will go to my counselors to see who has a question. Councillor Mancinelli?
Thank you very much. Through the chair, thank you for coming before council today and looking at investing in our community. Having spoke to you of this matter before the meeting, you made me aware of the perceived miscommunication that you think happened between the residents and what you're proposing to create in the community. After talking to you, I was thinking of tabling this for a couple months to allow for community engagement to happen now that many restrictions have been lifted, and there may be a time frame for that. Would that be useful and agreeable and helpful for seeing what the community might want and for the direction you're looking for? Through the chair.
Through the chair, yes, Troika would be willing and open to further engagement on this matter with residents and the school board and other stakeholders that have an interest in this application.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Councillor Mancinelli. Councillor Stevens?
Thank you, through the chair. I have some questions about the proposed project as well as what you are trying to amend, you don't mind. So for starters, my understanding is that initially this was set to be a low or medium density residential area. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the current land use designation.
And thank you. And so you want to change that to flex area. would that include any, I just want to clarify, would that include commercial as well as residential?
Yeah, so the idea is, through the chair, the idea is to have a mixed development in accordance with the Flex 2 designation. So this would really just be a local neighborhood center with a gas station, a convenience store, and some local office uses, appropriate for a dentist or local hardware or a Kumon classroom, for example.
Thank you.
So we're
Through the
quite
chair,
happy-
and just to be clear,
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add that we want to maintain the existing density that's permitted within the low and medium rise land use designation that is currently on the site.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the commercial development that's being proposed, would it be fair to say that much of it is oriented around servicing the local community rather than large shops that would draw people from other parts of the city?
Through the chair, yes, absolutely. That is the intent of this application. We see this as the best available site to provide those local services to existing residents. Looking down the road, when there's 1,000 residents living within the first 2 phases of development, all of those residents will be traveling outside of the neighborhood to get local services.
Thank you. My final question, why the amendment to the existing concept plan?
To allow the local commercial uses and to allow through the chair, and to allow the fuel station use. Within Regina zoning bylaw, the only zone that allows for fuel stations is a high rise mixed use zone. So unfortunately, the selection of that zone was driven by the use. It was not driven by the need for density.
Thank you very much. This sounds like a great project.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Bresciani.
Thank you very much. Just in regards to the consultation with the school divisions, did you engage with both the public and the separate school divisions? I did see one letter in there from the public, but how was that handled, or have you done that through the chair?
Yep, through the chair, and Dan can fill in the gaps here, but yes, we've had initial conversation with we had one initial conversation with the public school board, and since that time and since the letter that was submitted, we've had an additional conversation with the public school board's planner, and she expressed an openness to continue to have engagement and further discussions on the matter. The separate school board, I think, is deferring to the public school board on this matter, but we have not heard directly from them, even though we have reached out to them.
Okay, thank you for that. You did say that you have engaged the community, and again, this is considered almost a neighborhood hub, is what I'm hearing from you, where it would be amenities that the community would utilize, and places where moms could go for coffee, or being adjacent to the school, things like that. That's what you're considering here. Is that accurate?
Through the chair, yes, that is accurate. That is precisely what we're looking to have on that location. And the community's perception, I think, once they've become more familiar with what we're trying to do on the site, their response, we've noticed, has been changing. And really, it's just an initial response or reaction to that high-rise mixed-use zone. So I think that's really throwing people for a loop. But we're more than willing to work with city staff to find an appropriate designation that would allow for the use that we are seeking in this regard, without adding additional density on the site.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Councillor Shaw.
Hi, thank you for coming here once again. We spoke at the planning. And just a quick question and kind of refreshment because I'm on the planning committee and some other councils may not have heard. But my recollection of that meeting was it was denied because consultation wasn't conducted, and we all know how important that is to myself and to other council members. During your consultation with the public and going door to door, can you tell the council the reactions that you got, the engagement that you received from your door to door consultation with the public through the chair?
Through the chair, Dan, if you would respond to that question, I think that would be best.
Yes, through the chair. This is Dan Tauber, Development Manager with Troika Management Corp, calling from Kelowna, BC. Yes, I did walk the area. Wanted to speak with people face to face, as it was hard to conduct an open house given the circumstances. We were not allowed to do that. Trying to engage with people one-on-one, and I guess the thought process behind it was a lot of people thought, residents, it was going to be a high-rise. That's all they would sort of see. And I was trying to relate to them, like Jason was mentioning, within what we're trying to do, that's within that zone it has to be. After showing some of the residents in the areas pictures, renderings of what we're proposing, a little bit more of a relaxed feeling of looking at, oh, that's what you want to do, or this is what you can do. So I think having more public engagement, maybe with things opening up a little bit more, we can actually conduct an open house and get that much more feedback. I think a lot of people are more receptive to what we're looking at now, and with a little bit more of what's been going on online with social media, I think that's actually gained a little traction in helping out people understanding what the intent is here. So that's what I felt from people. And of course, that was in November, and I think that's gained momentum as we're moving forward. So that's sort of the consensus I got, was not knowing what exactly this application was for.
Thank you for that. And I know during the conversation, they were concerned about a certain bill that would go on there, and you were sure that wouldn't happen. Another question. I know there was some pushback from the school. You had mentioned that because it would be beside the gas station. Can you explain how that kind of got mitigated, or that concern from the school board, through the chair?
Yep, through the chair. Essentially, the school has a policy that they apply, which is really applied in situations where they're locating new schools within areas where they have a 185-meter radius from commercial areas. That is sort of their preference for where they would locate new schools. Given the context in Rosewood, where you have a joint use school that is adjacent to a flex area, which is fairly unique, just given the quick implementation of both the concept plan and the school site at the time of the approval for each of those. You have this unique situation in Rosewood where you have this a school site adjacent to the flex zone. So their radius is essentially 185 meters, but it's kind of as the crow flies. And so in talking to the planner, when we were looking at the actual walking distance from school entrances to the site, you're upwards of 400 meters. And she found that interesting, and also the provision in the initial concept plan submission for a mid-block east-west connection south of Mapleford as well, that would provide an alternative route that wouldn't be on Mapleford. So I think a lot of the discussion with the school board is now more focused on the transportation impacts and traffic and those kinds of impacts. And you know, from our view, locating a local, having local services located in the site would draw traffic from the school, given that the cars are going to that location. They're not driving across the school. They're really just turning into the site off of Courtney. And conversely, if where residents are seeking local services, they have the option to walk to get those services and aren't generating car trips that would then potentially go in front of the school as well. So that's sort of where our last conversation landed, and there's certainly some openness there to continue those discussions.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that because I compared it a lot to the school on Imperial on Broad Street in my location. I approved this at planning, and I believe that this would be a really good development, and I appreciate all the work that you've been doing trying to consult with the people in the ward. So thank you, and I appreciate that, and I'll fully support that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shaw. Councillor Skidniak.
Thank you. So just building on a previous comment by Councillor Mancinelli in relation to tabling this report for further discussion, just to confirm, if that were to occur, would you be open to having further discussions both with residents in the area and also the school boards and administration to address some of the concerns that were noted in the report that we have recommending against this development?
Through the chair, yes, if that's the direction of council, then we would abide by that direction and continue those conversations.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zakidniak. I see no further questions from council. However, I may have one or two for you myself. Within the report before council, it says that the applicant indicated changing market conditions has resulted in increased demand for commercial space. Could you provide me some background on that?
Yeah, through the chair. I think Dan, fill in here where you have additional information, but certainly for these kinds of local services, the demand is driven by the immediate residents. And given the, I guess, distance to other local service areas, that it's our understanding and our belief and the belief of our potential clients in this area, or Troika's potential clients in this area, that there is a gap in that local service demand in that area. I don't know, Dan, if you have other comments on that.
Yeah, no, that's more like it. I guess within the plan itself right now, the local area commercial is located up in the northwest quadrant of the plan, which will probably be 7 years away, if not longer. Given the other commercial areas within the Cooperstown, which I'm only trying to guess, that'll probably be 10 years, if not longer away. So literally the area will be lacking commercial for a very long time. So getting back to your question about market, we would assume other developers in the area would develop, which would gain another commercial area, but that doesn't seem like that's going to happen. So based on those conditions, we feel fit that this neighborhood commercial will act as an amenity for a long time.
Thank you. I see there are some limitations according to, in terms of build, according to a wastewater treatment plant. What square footage are you able to build on the site that's before us? What's the build out?
Yeah, I think that through the chair, I don't have the exact development standards in front of me, but the existing allowance, I believe, is probably around 40 to 50% coverage. But I would have to defer to administration on that.
Thank you.
So I don't have the exact standard here with me.
Okay, no, I'm happy to ask them in that, but thanks very much. And I just want to clarify, there's a note in the report about the distance from schools required, the general rule being here 185 meters. It's noted as something else in the report. You're suggesting that you walked it from the entranceway to the edge of your property and it's 195 meters?
Yes, so through the chair, you can see in our slide number 5 that was submitted as part of the delegation materials. There's a number of different walking distances. So the blue arrow is the walking distance if you were to walk east to Courtney and cross at Courtney and go back to the site. The purple line is if you walk to the 4-way intersection at Silverleaf and Mapleford and then walk back to the site. And then the sort of turquoise green arrow you see in the middle is the mid-block connection that actually isn't in place yet. So that's really a feature that is yet to be built in the site, but there's potentially a zebra pedestrian crossing there as well that will be built at a future date. And the shortest distance there is 195, as you can see from the front of the school to the site, edge of the site.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah.
I see no further questions from council, so I'll thank you again very much for your presentation this afternoon, gentlemen, and ask that you please leave the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll now consider item CR 22-7, concept plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 1462 North Courtney Street. Councillor Fundura, could I ask that you please introduce the report?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor. I bring report CR 22-7, which concept plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment 1462 North Courtney Street. That's City Council deny the application to rezone the property at 1462 North Courtney Street from RL, which is residential low-rise zone, to MH, mixed high-rise zone, and deny the application to amend the Rosewood Park concept plan to redesign or redesignate lands from low or medium to flex area 2. Master, can I get a seconder, please?
Andrew?
Councillor Stevens.
Councillor Fundura, do you have more to add?
Yes, I do. I've just we got what we need. Okay, I'll continue. Thank you.
Can you turn your, Councillor Fundura, could you turn your camera on, please?
I have it on. I can see myself.
Oh, I apologize. We can't see you in okay. If the folks online can see, we can't see you in chambers, but please proceed then.
Okay. Well, darn it. I have no whiskers anymore.
I can see you, John. You're looking good.
No beard. Okay, sorry, Mayor. The applicant would like to rezone this area to allow commercial development. The parcel is zoned RL, which commercial development is prohibited. Mayor, the proposed development does not comply with above policies to accommodate commercial development. As well, within the flex area, the proposed area is not part of your neighborhood hub cluster. As well, the applicant proposal does not contain factors to mitigate the potential land use, any land use conflict. And in the public notice comments, there were just about 40 comments that were received, and they were all in opposition to the proposal. As well, we received from both public and separate school board letters in the fact of being in opposition to the development. Administration as well recommends denial. At RPC voted 8-1 to deny. Mayor Master Commission 6 concurrence. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Findura. Prior to opening it up to council, I think I'll ask administration to speak to the report before us. Councillor Findura, can I ask you to turn your microphone off now?
Thank you, Mayor
Thank you.
Masters.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Masters, and through you. So as we've heard, the applicant is Troika Management Corporation, and they're proposing to rezone a property at 1462 North Courtney Street from the current zone, which is residential low-rise, to a mixed high-rise zone, which is a mixed-use zone that allows for commercial and residential. And the purpose of that is to facilitate a future gas station. So we have an associated amendment to the concept plan is included as well to allow for the consideration of the zoning. So administration is recommending denial. We did receive a large quantity of feedback from the neighborhood that were in opposition to the proposal, and specifically the gas station. And we received opposition from both the public and the separate school boards. In addition, when reviewing the policies within the Coopertown neighborhood plan, it was found that it didn't meet the policies and therefore in contravention. And we provided that information in the report for council and you, Mayor Masters. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dawson. Council? Any members of council have questions for administration? Councillor Bresciani.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Masters. So I'd like to ask administration, when we engage the school divisions, do we actually have a fulsome conversation? As the developer has indicated, you know, it was used to be a considered high rise where they actually sit down with them and talk about the amenities. Because I'm starting to, I don't think sometimes they understand the benefit of having these neighborhood hubs adjacent to, you know, services to schools. If it be daycares or if it be dance or recreation facilities, anything like that, where parents don't have to drive so far to get to these amenities. So this would be a local hub. I'm wondering how the conversation is done with the school divisions. Through the chair.
Through you, Mayor Masters, I'll start and then I'll ask the team to join. So the typical process is to send a circulation of the proposal, and in this case, we didn't have conceptual drawings, just that the request to rezone the property would allow for a variety of commercial uses and specifically a gas station. And so that's sent to a variety of different technical and community members that may be affected by the proposal. You'll see in your submission or in your report package, there is a written response from the school board. But I might ask Mr. Mario if he has any further information about potential conversations that may have been had.
Yeah, through the chair, we did engage the school board on their comments. They did clarify that they were primarily concerned about proximity of retail and specifically kind of a convenience type of retail as it is in proximity to the school. They were concerned about sort of that draw of students walking across to use the facility while during class time, and they also raised concern about traffic. So they didn't indicate to us any potential compromise or anything like that. So that's where the conversation ended.
Thank you. Was it clear that both school divisions were surveyed? Yeah, that's at 2 schools, I think. There is that accurate?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. They both commented similarly.
Okay. I guess I'd like to ask administration, when we look at this, how do we actually engage the community? As we've heard from the developer has done their due diligence, how do we as a city, I know we have our I guess our development plans in place and the concept plans, but how do we actually develop the community to reach out to ask if they want a neighborhood hub? Through the chair.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Masters. It's a good question. So our process would be to provide any information that we're provided from the applicant. And in this case, it was the request to rezone as well as the concept plan. Like I said, there was no conceptual drawing. So the proposal is to allow for the amendment, which would allow for the variety of uses within the zone. We can't hold them to a gas station only or a specific location on the site. They've simply asked for a concept plan and rezoning. So that is what's circulated to the community, and we can't necessarily predict that that's exactly what's going to take place on that property without some kind of assurances through other mechanisms, which were not requested at this point in time. And specifically, and I went through those at Regina Planning Commission, those would be something like a different type of zone, like a direct control district or a concept plan. And the applicant had mentioned those as well.
Thank you. I guess the last question I have is, we've seen other gas stations and other neighborhood hubs. I know it was in our OCP that neighborhood hubs are vitally important to the growth to build community in the neighborhood. So, I am going to ask administration, have we reached out to any areas where they've built these gas stations with other services for the community, and what has usually the response been?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I might refer Councillor to Appendix A 3.2, and that shows the vision for the Coopertown Neighborhood Plan, and there's areas that are designated for neighborhood hubs. So through the planning process, we do design the neighborhood and the transportation network in terms of where neighborhood hubs are. And so in that process, this area was defined as residential. It was communicated and vetted through the community, through the planning process at a concept plan level and at a neighborhood plan level, and it was to be residential. And so what the applicants are asking is kind of to redefine what that area, the intended purpose of that area is, from residential to commercial. And so when we went out to the community to ask whether that change would be acceptable, we received an overwhelming response that would not be acceptable. And so that's why we've concluded that this application should be denied. And so whenever there's a concept plan or a rezoning application, we do take public comment into consideration through that review process.
Thank you. So you did take into consideration then the public engagement that the developer did as well?
Through you, Mayor Masters, and just a minute, I have that in my notes here. I believe that we didn't receive that information from the developer. I might just ask Mayor Samario to comment on that one.
Thank you.
Through the chair, we didn't receive any feedback from the additional developer engagement that was performed. So we have no information to go on whether or not there was a change in opinion or not. So we have really nothing to follow up on with that.
Thank you. If they had provided that, would have that then changed administration's view if there was from residents, if this was wanted, would have that been viewed differently then, I guess is what I'm asking?
Through you, Mayor Masters, is the typical process is we typically like to ask the question to the public in a way that we need to hear the response to do the review. And so without seeing the conversation or understanding the questions that were asked to the public by the developer, it would be difficult for me to answer that question right now.
Okay. All right. Sorry, last question. Coopertown is going to be developed when? Through the chair? Or approximately when?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Masters, that's a good question. So the neighborhood plan has been developed, and there's pieces of concept plans that have been approved. And so timing of development really depends on when services can be delivered and when the developers or landowners want to develop those lands and phase them into our growth. So there are some areas that could be developing right now, provided that we have the proper services available. And Mayor Masters did indicate one of the limitations right now is wastewater.
Okay. I'll leave it there for others to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, through the chair. Question for planning. Is it standard practice that when actualizing a concept plan like this, you wouldn't put commercial development near a school, or is this a best practice that's just been established by the school board alone?
Through you, Mayor Masters, there are instances within the city that do have commercial in proximity to schools, and they've been integrated into the design of those neighborhoods. When developing this neighborhood, there was feedback from the residents that area would be most appropriate for low-rise residential. So I would say that this area was developed with community consultation. As indicated in the report, that is the school board's proximity request. And through the process, we're able to receive requests or information and use that to make our recommendation. And in this case, we felt that was a valid concern since it was a significant change to the existing plan.
Thank you. Through the chair, did the school board summon any evidence to suggest that in areas where there is commercial development close to a school, that there is higher rates of absenteeism? Is there safety risks with kids crossing the road at an elementary school? Any evidence at all that there would be the effects that they anticipate?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I appreciate the question, and there's different scenarios and different roadways and different types of development in and out of the area. Right now, this is a developing area with likely a concern due to traffic and due to safety, and as it's developing, there might be a lot of distractions for children crossing the street. I'm going to ask Mr. Mario to speak about the actual conversations, because that's your question about the actual conversations that we've had with the school boards, and I'm not sure if there was anything provided in related to your question.
Through the chair, they provided no studies or anything like that. I think their policy is a long-standing one, and it's based on sort of anecdotal evidence of their own experiences. So there are some examples of schools in proximity to commercial areas. Argyle Park has 2 schools near it. Connaught School, which I know you're familiar with. Imperial also has commercial in the vicinity. There's a few others. So their policy is just based on their own experiences, and that's what they use to respond to these types of application requests.
Thank you. Through the chair, my next question asks for planners to weigh in at the city. In your opinion, would this commercial development, because this could set a precedent for how we make decisions down the road, would it actually pose a risk to school children? And if so, could that risk simply be mitigated by traffic calming, lights, pedestrian crossways, et cetera?
Through you, Mayor Masters, the primary reasons as outlined in the report for the recommendation don't necessarily relate to that question. The primary reasons is the public feedback that we received on the change based on the request from going to low-rise residential to a mixed commercial zone that would allow for a wide spectrum of commercial uses as well as high-density residential. So that was one of the reasons, and of course the other reason identified in the report is the policy concerns in terms of where commercial can be located within this neighborhood. So we didn't go into the details of your question, and I would hate to speculate because it's based on a case-by-case basis on the road road type and surrounding community and the integration between commercial and the school site. Some of them work well together, and in other situations it doesn't. So I don't want to make a broad statement based on that.
Okay, thank you. I will support the tabling motion because further consultation is a net benefit. But my undertaking to administration is that your expertise needs to be part of that discussion. So it can't just be a matter of anecdotes and speculation. This would set a precedent. So my expectation of administration is as this goes forward for further public consultation, you'll have evidence to put on the table for residents as well as the school board to consider. We should be an objective source of this information. Would that be fair?
Through Councillor Stevens, yeah, we can certainly do that as part of the tabling motion should that occur.
Thank you. My next question, in terms of the commercial development, you've mentioned how this does not align with the existing proposal. It certainly doesn't align with what has been anticipated for Coopertown. Functionally, however, would this jeopardize the spirit of this development as a mixed community with commercial as well as residential? Put another way, is it simply there are rules, we're trying to abide by those rules, or functionally would this somehow jeopardize this development and that at Coopertown down the road?
Through you, Mayor Masters, the question is one of that of opinion. We based our recommendation, like I said, off of the public input on the change and the existing concept plan and neighborhood plan. Are there changes that are fully supported by the community and go against policy that we would recommend in some situations? Certainly. And in this case, we didn't feel like there was enough evidence to support this in terms of making that significant change to the fabric of the community. So,
thank you. My last question: economic sustainability. Would this commercial development make this area a growth pays for growth kind of concept plan, not just in terms of capital but operations? Would this actually advance certain economic sustainability objectives we hold?
Through you, Mayor Masters, we actually don't have an application in front of us for what would take place on this the site. We don't have a concept plan other than what the developer has told us, and we know that there's a gas station. But the request here is for a concept plan amendment and a zoning amendment, so that would then allow for a variety of different commercial uses and high-rise residential. So without solidifying what that looks like, it's hard for me to answer that question, and I don't know what the viability of the future business may be on that property.
Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Shaw.
I have a few follow-up questions from earlier. When we talk about public engagement, we talk about that's the reason why this has been denied by city administration. But the public consultation wasn't a full public consultation. Am I correct in saying that through the chair?
Through you, Mayor Masters, we followed process in that we circulated to residents within the area as per our public notice bylaw, and provided the adequate time to respond to that, and the collection of the responses is provided for you in Appendix B. There was no open house. We don't do an open house or do in-person consultation on every application, nor do we need to. That's on a case-by-case basis. We're required and we're needed to obtain a little bit more information.
So I see here we received 42 reply back. So I just don't feel that was quite enough to really base a decision. Now, can you maybe let council know during the planning meeting, what was the biggest complaint? And we heard it from numerous delegates that evening. Can you tell council what the complaint was if they rezone this into a high-rise mixed development? Through the chair.
Through you, Mayor Masters, if I recall correctly, it was traffic, but I'm not sure if you're thinking of something else, Councillor Shaw.
I heard one delegate say that they were worried that it would be a rapid housing initiative. Can you verify that is correct? That's just from my recollection and memory is what I heard that evening, to the chair.
Through you, Mayor Masters, I don't want to dispute that, but I don't recall that conversation.
Okay, that's fine, I do. Another thing, that setting precedents here, what I'm kind of a little bit worried about here is we set precedents, even just to example, my Imperial School on Broad Street. How is that not set precedents for this project to move forward, to the chair?
Through you, Mayor Masters, yeah, I had acknowledged that there are some examples within the city where there are commercial businesses adjacent to existing schools, and we understand that those are existing neighborhoods. And the difference here is that when the neighborhood was designed and the concept plans were designed, this area was designated as low-rise residential. And so now to request the change, we need to identify and review the impacts of that request. And we've provided with you within the report the impacts and then the recommendation.
So, you know what? I'm going to leave it there. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillor Zakidniak.
Thank you. So, as we've heard today, that the negative feedback received from residents really did have a large impact on the on administration's recommendations in relation to this application. So I also support a tabling motion, and I think that as we know that the developer received their own feedback when they did their own feedback process. We've heard some information from them about that feedback. That feedback wasn't received by administration in order to weigh into their assessment process. So I think it's important that there's a desire for additional feedback to be collected. I think it makes sense to support that, table this, allow for some additional feedback to be for the applicant to get some additional feedback. What I would like to suggest is in the wording of this tabling motion, that it could say something along the lines of tabling the application to give the applicant additional time to engage with residents, administration, and the school boards and make any potential amendments based on that feedback. I think it would be helpful for them to engage not simply with residents, but also with administration as mentioned by Councillor Stevens and the school boards, just to see if there can be more common ground achieved through that process. So that's just a suggestion to Councillor Mancinelli, who I think will be moving the tabling motion, and then we won't be able to discuss it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zakidniak. Councillor Stadnichuk.
Thank you, Mayor Masters. Through the mayor, I have questions more on the land use plan. So I'm trying to understand the appendices with this report. So there is Appendix A-3.1, and there is Appendix A-3.2. Just because the first one, 3.1, does not have street names on it, I just want clarification so this is the Rosewood Park area, so it would be on the second appendix, would it be from Armour Road to, I don't even know what street that is below Rochdale. I just want to get clarification of which map that first land use plan is.
Ms. Dawson?
Yeah, sure, I can help you through that, through you, Mayor Masters. So Appendix A 3.1 is the Rosewood Park concept plan. And are you asking, sorry, through you, Mayor Masters,
how it fits into 3.2, that map?
Okay, I'm gonna ask Mr. Mario to he might have a better idea. Thanks.
Through the chair, the north boundary of Rosewood Park sort of aligns with the development boundary of Maple Ridge, which is the community to the east. You can see Mapleford Boulevard, which is a key marker, and that shows up on Appendix A 3.2. And Mapleford, pardon me, the north-south collector, which is the light blue street on Appendix A 3.2, is the north-south road that bisects the Rosewood Park concept plan. Does that answer your question?
Partially. Maybe through the mayor, I'll ask a second question. I'm trying to understand what has already been designated as commercial for commercial development. So on 3.2, the pink circle along Rochdale Boulevard is supposed to be commercial development. And then we have a pink area on 3.1 that is flex area. And I guess my question is, as part of the land use planning, those areas, is it the pink area that is designated for commercial development? And has there been any interest or proposals for commercial development already in the concept plan area?
Through the chair, I can take that question. So I'll start with Appendix A 3.1. The pink area, which is just to the west of the current school, is identified for a flex area. So that would accommodate some commercial uses, and it's intended to be in a mixed use form. So a little bit more specific than what is being proposed with this current concept plan amendment. So there is opportunity for those services that were built into the plan. So the amendment here before you is something in addition or different to what was already being planned for. If I can refer to Appendix A 3.2, the light pink area, which is surrounding Rochdale Boulevard, is intended for sort of an urban center use. So those would be higher order type of retail uses that you might find in a major intersection, such as two arterials, this one being Rochdale and Courtney Street. So that's the primary commercial center for this entire Rosewood Park concept plan. And the other piece that has been identified in the concept plan, which is the current first phase of Coopertown, is the potential neighborhood hub, which is at the corner of Rink and Courtney Street. And that is an area that is being implemented within the Coopertown concept plan, and Dream Developments owns that and intends to develop some commercial space in that location, more at a local scale.
Okay, thank you for that. So just to clarify, and maybe this would have been a question for the developer, is the reason this is before us is because that is the land that the developer owns. He doesn't have land in any of the area that is designated for commercial already.
Through you, Mayor Masters. Oh, I see Ben has the answer to that one. So go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, through the chair, the current developer does own the land to the east, to the west of the elementary school within the flex area, but that would be a later phase.
Okay, I understand that. Okay, thank you very much for helping clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stadicuk. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Mayor. I would support a tabling motion, but I want to, having heard the debate, indicate some cautions. First of all, I would be very slow as a non-expert to question the judgment of a school board recommending for reasons that he gives against the development. The school boards, after all, are the real experts in what is required to protect children's safety and to prevent interference with education. The second thing is, I would be slow to alter a concept plan without very detailed and good evidence. When we set up the concept plan, we do it in accordance with planning principles ultimately set out by our planning folks. If we start altering it and adding in hubs in different places based on which developer develops which section in the concept plan first, will ultimately destroy any kind of rational planning for the area. And indeed, the planning principle will become first developer gets here, gets to put in the planning hub because they have more places, at least in the short run, around that spot. So I'd be very slow to mess with a concept planning plan, especially given the care which goes into and the consultation which goes into forming those plans. Thirdly, I respect the expertise of our administration in consulting the public and their public consultation plans. I understand that in special circumstances, they may want to go back and reconsult. And in this case, there may be special circumstances because the presence of the pandemic may have restricted the kind of consultation that they might have liked to have carried out. However, in normal cases, there wouldn't be, I think, a call for our planners to go back and consult a second consultation because the developer didn't like the results of the first consultation. So while I'm going to support tabling, I want to do so and emphasize the importance of respecting the expertise that has gone into what is before us, and I think what probably concerned our own planning commission in accepting the denial of the proposal. That expertise is based on expertise of the schools, it's based on expertise of our own planners, and it's based on expertise in our own city on consulting the public. So I support the tabling motion, but it's going to take some very good evidence to convince me that we should change the concept plan that was initially put in place. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Mancinelli, if you're going to make a motion to table this, would you mind if I asked a couple of questions of administration first?
I would be more than happy to wait. That's why I waited for everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. For the administration, do we have the ability to write a zoning definition or description to accommodate a local neighborhood commercial development without leaving it wide open under existing zoning?
Through you, Mayor Masters, we do have the ability to do a contract zone, and I think that might be what you're referring to, but correct me if I'm wrong. So a contract zone would be for a specific development on us, and you can include in that, it's registered on the land title, you can include in that a site plan and requirements of that development, and you can even put time limitations on that. So that is a tool that you can use under the Planning and Development Act. It was not requested from the applicant for this particular proposal.
Thank you. It was not requested. Did you present it as an option to the applicant?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I might ask Mr. Mario what that conversation was, but typically through our process, we do look at all the tools within the toolbox or those that are available to us to see if it would be adequate for the proposal. Should we be recommending a denial, which is not our typical process. So, Mr. Mario, would you be able to comment further on what those conversations look like?
Through the chair, the conversation didn't revolve around a contract zone specifically until after Regina Planning Commission. We do note that a gas station was really the primary topic here that was driving all of the conversation. A gas station is a discretionary use within the MH zone when it's within proximity to residential. So regardless, City Council would have the ability to see the details through a discretionary use application through that process. So a contract zone might provide ultimate assurance, but at the end of the day, a discretionary use would be a similar opportunity to consider the details. That's where the conversation went.
Yeah, thank you for the answer, Mr. Mario. I guess my question is more to the point about applying an existing sort of wide open zoning to an area that has a, well, there's land use conflict potentially or some concerns about what then happens on the balance of the site or in the area. And so that was actually my question. I was sort of zeroing in on contract zones. So everybody would know into perpetuity what was allowed there, you know, subject to future applications. It was more a question if we had the ability to do that. What is the site coverage that the applicant is able to build out were this to be approved?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I do have that. The MH zone, so the proposed zone does allow for a site coverage of 65%.
So how many square feet would that be in this case?
I could do it in hectares. The site is approximately 1 hectare in size, so 0.65 hectares. I could get someone to do quick math for us.
I can convert fast too. It's good if you can do it. Okay, it's fine. Again, I'm going to go back to, if we're going to amend a concept plan, I think along with a little bit of what Councillor Hawkins was stating, we do have mechanisms to actually very much limit, as opposed to opening up the amendment to a concept plan via contract zone, as I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Masters, we do. We typically utilize those in unique development opportunities or for unique situations. Our guidance through the official community plan is to use that tool when necessary, but otherwise the preference is to apply a conventional zone. But I mean, it doesn't limit the opportunity to seek that here.
Okay, thank you very much for the answers. Councillor Mancinelli, you're up.
Thank you very much. Appreciated the debate on this topic through the chair. Just going to move in a moment to tabling motion, and my rationale behind it isn't because I'm in favor or against the development. It's because through talking to people involved, residents, the developer, it's come across that there's been a breakdown of communication on what may or may not show up on this site with commercial or without commercial. I'm going to end up asking this to be tabled for 2 months to allow a little bit of engagement to happen so people can vision both with commercial and without commercial and what that might look like in the neighborhood, and maybe get a bit more wholesome feedback as to how that divvies out and what the benefits and negatives might be to this whole development. So with that, I'd like to table this report for the next council meeting of approximately 2 months from now, whatever the date might be, to allow the developer to take the information that they've garnered today through this meeting and go out and sell their project if it's a good one.
Thank you, Councillor Mancinelli. Councillor Mancinelli requires a seconder.
Councillor Mole.
Thank you, Councillor Mole. City Clerk, please call the vote.
Through you, Mayor Masters, the motion carries 11 all unanimously. So all members of council voted in favor of this motion.
Thank you very much, Clerk. Council, give me 1 second to collect the papers and go back to where I need to be. Council will be discussing CR 22-6, proposed concept plan and zoning bylaw amendment, Eastbrook Phase 4 and 5. We do have a delegation on the phone. I'd like to call upon delegation Evan Hunchak from Dream Development. Please introduce yourself for the record, where you're calling from, the organization you're representing, if any, and you'll have 5 minutes to address City Council, after which time you'll have the opportunity to respond to any questions that members of council may have for you. Good afternoon, Mr. Hunchak.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, sir. Please proceed.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present at City Council today. To introduce myself, my name is Evan Hunchak, and I'm the General Manager at Dream in Regina. I represent the developer of the Eastbrook community and the landowner of the development application before you today. To assist in your understanding, attached with my formal presentation are visual aids which I could speak to should you have any questions. I'm before you today to seek your approval to allow for the zoning and concept plan amendment to the current town's concept plan. The reason for this application is to allow for the appropriate zoning to develop a diversity of new homes in Southeast Regina. Within the proposed area, there is a mix of townhomes, single-family laned homes, and front drive single-family homes. This zoning application is consistent with the approved town's concept plan, which identifies this area to have a mix of low and medium density residential. Specifically, we are proposing RU residential urban for the low density lots and RL residential low rise for the medium density lots. As well, a portion of the lots would have the LA lane access overlay zone applied. Our application also includes the removal of 2 walkways to connect to the creek system, as there is no pathway present where these walkways were originally planned for. The path system in the creek is located on the west side only and not on the east where these walkways were planned. Last, our application also has the removal of 2 lanes to avoid redundant infrastructure where it's not needed. The proposed revised density still exceeds the OCP's target of 50 people per hectare. The new anticipated density is anticipated to be 54.6 people per hectare compared to 55.4 people per hectare as in the current plan. This reduction in density also includes the application following this one next at City Council by Northridge. In regards to any potential concerns of not having enough parking available for the vehicles through the use of the lane access overlay zone, we conducted a parking analysis for this area. Within this area, all streets are wide enough to allow for parking on both sides of the street. Where the lane access overlay zone is applied, there would be a total of 1,120 parking stalls over both phases, or 3.5 parking stalls per home on average. When future development occurs east of this area, the location of Anaquad Road will shift approximately 40 meters to the east. When this occurs, the existing rural road cross-section, that is, as it exists today with ditches, will be replaced with an urban road cross-section, complete with curb, gutter, sidewalks, and landscaping. New lots and homes will then front the new Anaquad Road when it is aligned in the future. The future Anaquad Road will then tie into the current alignment at Aaron's Road and won't disturb Pacers Park. This plan to realign Anaquad Road is consistent with the approved Southeast Neighborhood Plan. Through the public consultation process, no comments or concerns were provided by the public. Our intent would be to construct the park in this area, which is MR2, in 2023. We'll work with City Admin on the design of this park, but would anticipate it to have a soccer field, play structure, basketball court, and a pump track for skateboards, scooters, bikes, and inline skaters. With City Council's approval of this application, this would allow for the completion of Dream's Eastbrook neighborhood, meaning that there will be no additional phases of development after this. Within the OCP, specifically Goal 5, Phasing and Financing Growth, Section 14.20V and Map 1, the Growth Plan, the current town's concept plan before you today is located within Phase 1 of the Growth Plan. All future growth lands located north of Aaron's Road or east of Anaquad Road are identified for development in Phase 3 of the Growth Plan. This means that unless the OCP Growth Plan is amended by City Council, development in Southeast Regina will halt following completion of the Phase 1 lands and will not be permitted to resume until 75% of all Phase 2 growth lands throughout the entire city have been developed. Of note, as you may be aware, City Administration is currently reviewing the growth plan policy this year in 2022. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to present, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hunchak. Do any members of council have questions? Thank you, Councillor Bresciani.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mayor Masters, thank you, Evan, for coming forward. I appreciate the mix of development in the phase 4 and 5. One of the questions I do have for you, and I have heard from residents, is in the moving of Anaquad. I'm going to ask you, when you first came for the proposal, what was your recommendation on Anaquad, through the chair?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Bresciani. Through the chair, when we had first approached city administration in August of 2021, our initial interest was to amend the concept plan and Southeast Neighborhood Plan to keep Anaquad in its current location and not relocate it. Following that, we did survey the public that there are 80 residents within the Greens on Gardner that presently live in homes that back Anaquad. And we were curious to see the outcome of what their opinion was on the matter. We did have 40 of the 80 residents respond to our survey. And of the 40 that responded, 93% were in favor to keep Anaquad in its current location. We did try to progress that a little bit with admin about amending the neighborhood plan to not relocate Anaquad, but keep it in its current location. And difficulties arose in trying to demonstrate that with city admin. So we amended our tactics with the application that we had and just concluded to keep the neighborhood plan and concept plan as approved and not amend those. And if the city admin and others want to look at Anaquad again in the future, that would be available to them, whether to keep it in its current location or to relocate it 40 meters to the east. But I would like to note that Anaquad, as it does exist, is outside the concept plan boundary of what we have approved. And the application before you today, if it is approved by City Council for phase 4 and 5, does have the flexibility to allow Anaquad to stay in its current location or to move. And that flexibility is provided by the blocks that back Anaquad presently to have lanes on them with the concept plan, as well as our request for the front access FA overlay zone on those blocks to allow maximum flexibility.
Thank you for that clarity. So I just want to be clear. So if this goes forward, and if it didn't go forward, it would absolutely delay the work that you're doing. What would be the impact of that?
Yes, thank you again for the question, Councillor Bresciani. Through the chair, the reason that we would be before you today to seek City Council's approval is to allow for us to start construction in roughly 2 months' time. And any delay with the zoning application before you today would start to negatively impact the construction schedule, which will impact when we're able to deliver lots to builders that are in need of them for sustaining their businesses within Regina.
Okay, great, thank you. So just to be clear, if we move forward to engage the residents moving forward, because I will tell you that the 80 residents there are not aware that Anaquad was to be moved or is to be moved. They back that road. That was your first intent because you thought people obviously would worry. Is that something that you'll be looking at down the road, or as you move forward through this development, at looking at maybe the change for Anaquad through the chair?
Yeah, thank you for that question again. Through the chair, yeah, we would be interested to continue to work with City Admin. We're one of a few landowners in the Southeast Neighborhood Plan. The City of Regina, as the real estate department, is another landowner. And I think both of us have a responsibility to ensure the plan is right, regardless of whether it was initially or whether it should be amended to be corrected. But from my perspective in DREAM, there would be support for us to participate with city admin in the future, as well as future engagement with residents if there are parties who would be interested to re-look at the policy within the Southeast Neighborhood Plan and where exactly the location of the future collector Anaquad Road would be placed.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Councillor Shaw.
First of all, thank you for offering some clarity on this, because I was at planning and I wasn't sure how this all happened. So my question is, further with this Anaquad Road, public consultation said they wanted the road to stay in. City administration didn't want the road there. Am I correct in understanding that? Through the chair? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Councillor Shaw. Through the chair, I wouldn't necessarily put it entirely on city administration. For any application, it would be up to the applicant, which that would be myself with DREAM, to demonstrate any change that would be requested for a concept plan or a neighborhood plan amendment. And myself at DREAM and my colleagues, we did try to go through that process in trying to demonstrate that over a period of time in 2021. But practically speaking, we ran out of time. We concluded that in December of 2021, we would not be able to continue to push this forward to seek that amendment and demonstrate it to the city's satisfaction. So for that reason, we concluded just to continue to follow the approved concept plan and the approved neighborhood plan. And the reason again for that is just because of our tight timelines with construction, in that we are seeking, I guess, a zoning approval before City Council today, so that would allow us to start construction once the snow melts here this spring.
So I'm really struggling here to understand this. When you did this consultation with the people, did you share this with the city administration through the chair?
Yeah, thank you for the question again, Councillor Shaw. Through the chair, yes, we did. We wanted to make sure it wasn't biased. So before we submitted the poll to the 80 residents and dropped them off at each person's door that lives there, we ran that by city admin just to make sure that the survey wasn't biased and that we weren't asking a question that would favor moving it versus favoring keeping it in its current location. And then following city admin's feedback, which they agreed that it came across as not being biased, we did circulate that to those 80 residents, and we did obtain detailed feedback from 40 of them, and we provided that feedback to the city admin as well.
So if this goes through, can you change it back and keep the Aaron's Road? Would that be possible within the 2 months if that goes, if what we say, or if council puts that in the change for this, for the chair?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Again, through the chair, there isn't an immediate rush to deal with Anaquad Road. As I had noted, it is outside the concept plan boundary,
right,
and it is in between phase 1 lands and phase 3 growth lands. So reviewing whether Anaquad, the policy of whether Anaquad does shift east 40 meters or whether to amend that policy, there's probably approximately 15 years between now and 15 years in the future before phase 3 development entitlements would be allowed. So there is a ample opportunity to get it right and not rush it. And that's why we had decided to just work with city admin so that the best decision could be made and not have it within this application to amend the Southeast Neighborhood Plan.
Okay. So with this You know what? Actually, that's fine. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for coming here today and giving us a better understanding of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. I see no further questions from council at this time. I'll thank you very much for your presentation this afternoon, Mr. Hunchak. I know you're back with us, but we are going to come on a scheduled break. So it's probably best that we'll reach out and tell you when to call back in for the next item that you're presenting on this afternoon.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. We'll now consider item CR 22-6. Councillor Fundura, could I please ask you to introduce the report?
Okay, Mayor, you can see me. My video's on. Okay.
I think everyone else can. Please proceed.
Okay. Mayor, I bring report CR 22-6, proposed concept plan and zoning bylaw amendment, Eastbrook Phase 4 and 5. The City Council approved the application to amend town's concept plan and approved the application to rezone portion of lands from Eastbrook Phase 4 and 5. Can I get a seconder, please?
Hawkins.
Yanni.
Thank you, Councillor
Thank
Hawkins.
you. Mayor, Dream Asset Management Corporation proposes an amendment to town's Eastbrook concept plan and to amend the zoning bylaw to accommodate low and medium density residential development, which includes lots intended for single detached and residential townhouses as well. Also, the applicant proposes a lane access overlay zone to allow front and lane access, vehicle access. The overlay zone will allow flexibility for the front and lane access. Administration reviewed the proposal and assessed it to comply with the OCP and the zoning bylaw. Administration recommends approval. Planning Commission voted unanimously on this board. Therefore, then Commission seeks concurrence. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fundura. Do any members of council have any questions? Actually, I apologize. You can put your hands up right now. I will actually turn it over to administration to speak to the report. Ms. Dawson?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Masters. I actually don't have much more to add from what Councillor Fundura has provided. It pretty much sums up our summary of the report as well. So I just reiterate that the proposal is to amend both the concept plan and to rezone the properties. So the concept plan includes replacing a portion of Block 17 from medium density to low density, as well as removing some removing some laneways and removing some walkways. And the rezoning application is to rezone various low and medium density residential zones to correspond with the concept plan amendments and to specifically apply that lane overlay zone. So with that, I would welcome any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Dawson. Councillor Bresciani, please go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Masters. So just a couple follow-ups here in regards to the Anaquod Road. We've heard that there was engagement done with the public, and that was shared with administration. Can I just ask, does administration ever feel the need to go out and do their own for this change at all, or how does that work?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I might take the opportunity to kind of go through the process that we followed and maybe clarify some questions and talk through that process. So the application submitted was for a concept plan amendment and the rezoning. Through the conversations with the applicant, they had requested the removal of the lane. When in conversations with administration, we recommended against removing the lane because it would jeopardize future conversations in a neighborhood that would be developing in the future. So with that, the applications were not changed. We never received an application to amend the Southeast Neighborhood Plan, and we never circulated or had feedback on an application that removed the lane. So what our circulation process included what was submitted by the applicant, which was a concept plan amendment that you have before you, as well as a zoning bylaw amendment that you have before you, and we're recommending approval.
Okay, thank you. Just to be clear, so in regards to there is the 80 homes, the 4 blocks that are south that do still back Anaquad. I just want to be clear that if there is a concept plan change to come forward from, or an amendment actually, from the developer, then how does engagement then work from that stance through the chair?
Through you, Mayor Masters. So I might take that in 2 bite-sized pieces here. So if the concept plan was changing within, within this proposed phase, so within Eastbrook phase 4 and 5, we would do what we did and circulate to the residents that would be impacted as per our public notice bylaw. So if there is a neighborhood plan, or sorry, concept plan proposed for lands that are east of Dreams lands, which are owned by a different landowner, we would go through the formal concept plan process, which includes public consultation. And if that proposal includes a realignment of Anaquad, that would be part of our consultation process. And those property owners within that area would be notified of that change.
Thank you. The when is the land on the east, when is that supposed to be, what is the growth plan for that? How many years out, through the chair?
Through you, Mayor Masters, we don't do it in years out. We do it in phases as per our phasing and financing plan. This is in phase 3 lands, which is dependent on build out and development of current phase 1 and phase 2 lands. So the applicant had used the projection of 15 years, and based on steady growth and build out of the current phases, that may be an appropriate estimation.
Okay, so knowing that just in regards to the Anaquad, that the developer did reach out to the homeowners that back Anaquad. There was a 97% to wanted to have Anaquad remain there. I guess the question is that when if the next step is, because we need to move this forward, the next step would then be to I guess do proper consultation with the homeowners that do back Anaquad, and that would have to be done as we heard from the developer. So I guess is the administration, I guess, would be willing to work with the developer if they do come forward in a concept plan amendment to the chair?
Through you, Mayor Masters. So Dream owns the lands that we're discussing today within phase 4 and 5 of Eastbrook. They do not own the lands east of the concept plan area that we're discussing. That would be different landowners that would be coming forward in the future with concept plan amendments, which then would be circulated and public consultation would be held on.
Right. I understand that, but I just want clarity that with Anaquad, we've got 80 homeowners that sit on I guess I'll ask administration, we've got 80 homeowners that sit on Anaquad right now that believe it's a roadway. So my question is that if the developer is to move forward and has already engaged these residents, my question is when it comes back, and if there is an amendment put forward, administration would also work with engagement to engage those 80 homeowners as well. Through the chair.
Thank you, Mayor Masters. I may ask for a clarification. Councillor Brashian, are you asking if we should advise the homeowners of the current policy within the Southeast Neighborhood Plan that does identify that there would be a potential for Anaquad Road to be realigned in the future through future development phases?
No, I wasn't asking that. I'm asking that if the developer, as we see now, is asking, it has raised it with the city staff, that was their first priority. If they raised it with their, as looking at Anaquad to remain, my question to you is, are you with the developer, if they do come forward and wanting to do that as they originally did, would then those 80 homeowners be engaged as to having a voice in that decision?
Through Mayor Masters, I think I know what you mean now. So if Dream, as the developer, and you're not speaking about the future development area that's owned by a different landowner, decide that they want to pursue the removal of the lane, which would then require Anaquad to stay in the position that it is, we would do further consultation. Any concept plan amendment or rezoning amendment does require public consultation.
Okay, thank you for that. Just if I can just make a comment, and then I'll be finished. I support the plan here as recommended by the concept change, but I will say that we have to be very careful when we're working with the developers. They've gone out and they've done the engagement. In this case, we also know that we've got other homeowners that are on Anaquad, and I understand that this is also a piece of it, and it's phasing, but it's very important to have the communication and the engagement with the residents, and that's my key piece here. So I understand that when another concept amendment comes forward, then that's when that would be done. So I just think it's vitally important that those residents that we have to engage them as well, because they've been homeowners for how many years, and they believe, and Anaquad is there. That's the road they see. So that's all I have. Thank you. So I do support this moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Councillor Shaw.
So just a question in light of that question. I'm just trying to get some clarification here. Sorry. So the new, the landowners that will be developing by this land, was there any concerns with new development with Anaquad Road staying through the chair? Was that ever brought up? I don't understand. I'm just trying to figure this out. Sorry. If that's a question that we can answer, I'm not sure, through the chair.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Masters, we have a neighborhood plan called the Southeast Neighborhood Plan. Within that plan, it contemplates the realignment of Anaquad Road so that properties on either side of that new alignment can be integrated and become one complete community. There is opportunity to change a neighborhood plan at any point in time, but we would need to have further consultations and reviews in determining what the impacts of that change may look like. And we have not done that, and nor have we been requested to do that formally.
Okay, that gives me some clarification. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Any other questions from council? I just have one question. When we do something like this in terms of a concept plan, which is an amendment of a concept plan and rezoning, which I'm happy to support, we're moving a major road, as I understand it, although what I'm also hearing is that upon application that will be reconsidered. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Masters, this application isn't considering the movement of any road. Maybe to clarify, the applicant had requested the elimination of the lane within their concept plan area. Our feedback was that would jeopardize future conversations about the lands to the east, which we weren't willing to do without having a full Southeast Neighborhood Concept Plan amendment before us and a concept plan approval. So. But that doesn't mean that we wouldn't do it in the future. I hope that clarifies. So their focus was the removal of the lane and not a realignment of Anaquad at this point in time.
Thank you. My actual question is, when we do anything relative to approving an original concept plan or amending a concept plan, do we send this through to Traffic and Roadways to ensure that the concept plan is workable long-term?
Yes, we do. Through you, Mayor Masters.
So there's never a concept plan approved or an amendment approved without going to traffic engineering?
That's right.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Fundura, you want to close off the debate?
No, Mayor Musto. Everything was said.
Excellent. Thank you. City Clerk, could you please call the vote?
Through you, Mayor Masters, the motion carries. All members of council voted in favor. It carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. We'll now consider item CR 22-8, proposed concept plan discretionary use application. Councillor Fundura, can I ask that you please introduce the report? Oh, I apologize, Councillor Fundura. One moment. We do have a delegation on this. Why don't I go there? I'd like to call upon delegation Evan Hunchak. Please introduce yourself for the record, where you're calling from, the organization you're representing. You'll have 5 minutes to address City Council, after which you'll have the opportunity to respond to any questions that members of council may have for you. Good afternoon again.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
We are, sir.
Okay, thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to present at City Council. My name is Evan Hunchak. I'm the General Manager at Dream in Regina. I represent the developer of the Eastbrook community, and we are the landowner of the application before you today. The applicant would be Northridge Developments. I do not have a presentation, but if there was any questions, I wanted to be available to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunchak. Any members of council have any questions for the delegation? Seeing no questions from council, I thank you very much for reappearing for us again this afternoon, Mr. Hunchak, and ask that you please leave the meeting.
Thank you. Goodbye.
All right, now we'll consider item CR 22-8. Councillor Fundura, could you please introduce the report?
Thank you, Mayor Masters. I bring report CR 22-8, proposed concept plan, zoning bylaw, and discretionary use application part of 2900 Anacott Road. The City Council approved the application to amend town's concept plan to redesignate lands from high-density residential to medium density. Also approved the rezoning of parcel C1 and C2 within the town's concept plan from RH, which is your residential high-rise zone, to RL, residential low-rise zone. Mayor, can I get a seconder, please?
Bresciani.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani.
Thank you, Mayor Masters. As you heard from the delegation, Northridge and Dream are proposing a group of townhouses as duplexes and fourplexes in this development. When you look at the goals and policies and considering to this report, the proposed application doesn't conflict with any OCP policies or goals. And one of the goals is about complete neighborhoods. As well, the types of support, the type of housing that will support the residents in the area range widely, and the backgrounds, the stages of life that the folks are in, including specific needs of individuals. So this looks perfect. The proposed development adds different housing forms in the neighborhood. Various citizens wish to live in a neighborhood, so that will help to provide needed housing for residents and the various needs. As well, in your concept plan, there was going to be a reduction in the town concept plan with this, a decrease in from 55.43 people per hectare to 54.8. Mayor Masters, at the Planning Commission, there was no any issues or a concern with this development. Planning Commission voted unanimously, and then Commission seeks concurrence. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fundura. Are there any questions on this application from members of council? Seeing none. Councillor Fundura, you want to close off debate?
No, there's no questions. It looks straightforward, so let's go.
Excellent. City Clerk, could you please call the vote?
Through you, Mayor Masters. The motion carries unanimously. All members voted in favor.
Thank you very much. We'll now consider item CR 22-9, OCP Concept Plan and Zoning Bylaw Amendments for Tower Crossing. Councillor Fundura, could I ask that you please introduce the report?
Okay, Mayor Masters, I bring report CR 22-9, OCP and Concept Plan and Zoning Bylaw Amendment Tower Crossing. That City Council approve amendments to the Tower Crossing Secondary Plan, as well approve Phase 1 Custom Plan. 3, approve textual amendments to the mixed large market zone, and as well approve map amendments to Regina zoning bylaw by rezoning the parcels of land within the Tower Crossing Secondary Plan area from urban holding zone to mixed large market zone and holding overlay zone. Mayor Master, can I get a seconder, please?
Secretariat.
Councillor Shaw.
Okay, Zania, thank you very much. Mayor, administration proposes to amend the Tower Crossing Secondary Plan and Regina zoning bylaw to accommodate development and economic potential of the Tower Crossing commercial area. In this area, the plans were previously approved for the lands. No rezoning or new development has occurred. Tower Crossing Secondary Plan is deemed partially obsolete, so we need to have some changes here. The report references the zoning the lands from urban holding zone to mixed large market zone. This will allow the lands to be developed as a mixed commercial and light industrial area. Mayor, this area has been waiting for this for a long time. I believe it's time to get started on this. The Planning Commission, again, Planning Commission voted unanimously, and Planning Commission seeks concurrence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fundura. Any questions from council? Seeing none, I'll ask the city clerk to call the vote.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the motion carries unanimously, all members voting in favor.
Thank you very much. We'll now pivot towards committee reports, council. We'll consider item CR 22-10, Regina Traffic Bylaw, 9900 amendments. Councillor Shaw, can you please introduce the report?
Yes, I'm still laughing out loud over that one. Thank you. Report is EX 22-7, amending the recommendation number 3. Change the speed limit to 250 meters south of Dewdney due to the green space and park area to Hill Avenue, and then after that to 70 kilometers after Hill Avenue. And executive is seeking concurrence for this.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Can we have a seconder on this motion?
Stadnichuk.
Thank you, Councillor Stadnichuk. This was debated at Exec Committee. I'll just ask right now, are there any questions from members of this on this report? Seeing none, Councillor Shaw, did you want to close off or you're good?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks. City Clerk, could I ask that you call the vote?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the motion carries unanimously, all members voting in favor.
Thank you very much, City Clerks. We'll now consider item CR 22-11, the Real Master Site Plan. I just want to advise Council that a representative, Jerry Fisher, from the Regina Exhibition Association Limited, is available via teleconference for questions, if you have any, questions only. So I'll just ask that Councillor Slaw, could you please introduce the report?
The report is CR 22-11, the master site plan and design guidelines for the campus. Master lease agreement between the City of Regina and the Regina X Limited, Real. Executive Committee adopted the resolution to concur recommendations after amending recommendation number 2 which was to be approved at our today's council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Could I get a seconder on this motion?
Hawkins.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. I will ask if any members of council have any questions for administration for the Regina Exhibition Association or any other comments. Councillor Zakidniak.
Thank you. So I do have a few questions. My first question is in relation to integrate the site master plan and integration with the nearby neighborhood, so North Central. So just a comment from Real regarding plans for integration of the site with the neighborhood and also job opportunities for folks in the neighborhood. So just a comment on that, please.
Councillor Zakidniak, I'm going to throw out a caution on this. Mr. Fisher, I'm going to go ahead and answer the question in a moment. But the matter before us is the lease and the master site plan. And so I'm going to try to get us to stop going so far, perhaps off of what the matter is before us. This was debated at length with the Exhibition Association Limited executive present. And I'm not sure the questions are tied into the matter before us, but in this case, Mr. Fisher, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Now we can, sir. Please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, in terms of integration with the neighborhood, I think that the executive committee meeting, we spoke about the supports on site from basketball opportunities to utilizing the property to access activation on site in a fairly substantial way, and also through the chair with regard to hiring. We expect that there'll be significant benefit in terms of hiring and employment on the site.
Great, thank you. And then as a follow-up question, within the master plan, there is a discussion about dark sky lighting, utilizing that throughout the site. So just curious, is that sort of lighting known to be friendly for bird migration? Is that one of the reasons for utilizing that kind of lighting?
I'm through the chair. I'm sorry, I wouldn't have that information at hand, and that would be a question for our architect, who's no longer on this call this week.
Okay, that's fine. I do have one final question. So the master plan also talks about partnering, well, about mixed multi-stream waste diversion. And so I was just wanting to ensure with the rollout of multi-stream waste diversion that would be in collaboration with the city and match the branding and how the city plans to roll that out across the community. So can you confirm that will be done in collaboration with the city's efforts?
Yes, we have been in contact with the city regarding lighting and to make sure that it's compatible with their rollout and plans, and also the transportation department, the environment department, the real estate planning department, and the permitting department have all been engaged to this point to make sure that we're in line with city requirements and future plans.
Great. Thanks. That's all I have.
Thanks very much, Councillor Zakidniak. Seeing no further questions from council, thank you very much, Mr. Fisher, for being present to answer questions this afternoon. You can leave the meeting now.
Thank you.
Councillor Shaw, did you wish to close off debate?
No, I think that's all we should talk about.
Thank you very much. City Clerk, could you please call the vote?
Through you, Mayor Masters, the motion carries unanimously with all members of council voting in favor.
Thank you very much, City Clerks. We'll now consider item CR 22-12, Efficiency Review Implementation Plan. Councillor Shaw, could I ask you to please introduce the report?
Thank you, Mayor Masters. CR 22-12 at the February 9th executive meeting, considering EX 22-10 report from City Manager's Office that a $2.7 million from the revitalization reserve will fund a one-time implementation of a modern customer relationship manager solution. $320,000 from the general fund reserve to fund the transformation office, and we're asking for concurrence at our today's council meeting for this.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Could I get a seconder on the motion?
I'll second that, Mancinelli.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mancinelli. I'll ask if there's any questions from council. Seeing none, City Clerks, please call the vote.
Through you, Mayor Masters, the motion carries unanimously with all members of council voting in favor.
Thanks very much, City Clerks. Council will consider item CR 22-13, Residential Road Renewal Financial Model Review. Councillor Shaw, could I ask you to introduce the report?
Thank you. EX 22-9 report to remove the item CM 20-29. I do believe this is just a receive and file motion. Want to remove this from the list of outstanding from the City Council. This responds to a motion brought in by CM 20-29. Administration was requested to design a new model to eliminate poor residential roads and maintain roads with the numbers of good to excellent roads. Hopefully they will increase. Just a receive and file of this motion, please.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Could I get a seconder on the motion?
Stadnichuk.
Thank you, Councillor Stadnichuk. I see Councillor LeBlanc has a question.
Thank you. Yeah, just a procedural question on my version of the document in the e-boardroom. It has a recommendation to remove the report from the outstanding list, but it doesn't seem to list receive and file the report. I'm just checking whether I'm seeing the right document and whether we should add the receive and file onto the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc. I'll have the City Clerk answer.
Through you, Mayor Masters, the recommendation is correct, Councillor LeBlanc. Because it's an action item, it's just that the item be removed from the list of outstanding items. And with that, the item will also be received and filed.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc. Councillor Stevens?
Thank you. It's just a procedural question, just so I know precisely what was in this. Administration came back, and I missed this discussion at executive. Administration came back with some options, and my understanding is that executive decided to stay with the status quo. Is that correct?
Thank you. Mr. Onrait?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Masters. That is correct, Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Stevens. Seeing no further questions from council, Councillor Shaw, did you wish to close off debate?
No, that's fine, Mayor Masters.
Thanks very much. City Clerk, could you please call the vote?
Through you, Mayor Masters, the motion carries unanimously, all members of council voting in favor.
Thank you very much, clerks. Now we are going to consider motion MN 21-16, transparent decision making. Councillor LeBlanc, could I ask that you please introduce the motion?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Masters. So this is a proposal to change the way in which items might be referred to the private agenda at executive committee meetings. So the proposal contained within is, I say, consistent with the existing procedure bylaw in that it says two fundamental things. The first of those is all matters to come before executive committee are, like those at council, presumptively open to the public and to be debated in public. And the second is that only elected representatives, rather than very important, very trustworthy, but appointed staff, can refer a matter from public into private, which is to say to shield it from public eye. And so if we make this change, essentially executive committee would function like city council in two important ways. The first is all matters are presumptively public. And if we wish to move into private, someone from council or the mayor would have to move a motion to that effect, get 6 votes. And the second fundamental change is only the portion of the matter which is in fact sensitive will be discussed in private, rather than the entirety of the document, which could be 90% publicly safe, will be discussed in private. So what I think it means is if this passes, we'll have more transparent decision making in that more of our decisions will be made and discussed publicly. I think an important point to keep in mind here is that this is about principle rather than people. So it's by no means suggesting that we don't trust our staff to make good decisions about what is commercially or politically sensitive. It's simply saying this politically sensitive task of deciding what ought to be debated in private should only be done by elected people. And there are 2 reasons for that. The first of that is people have a choice whether to re-elect us or not in now 2.5 years. And in order to make an informed decision on that point, they should know the vast majority of what we're doing, including matters we decide to move into private. And the second of those is related, and it is for individuals who are subject to re-election. We might be less likely to move matters into private because there's a valid political cost to pay for it. And so that will ensure only the matters that really should be in private will be discussed there. Just to logistics, what it would mean is all matters are presumptively public, like at council. If administration thinks there's relevant information that ought not to be seen by the public, they can simply not circulate that on the public agenda, flag for us at the public executive committee meeting. We have additional information we'd like to share on this. It's sensitive for these reasons. You might want to address it in private. Council can publicly debate whether it justifies moving into private on that point. If we do, we move and discuss it, come back out and summarize it, and continue the rest of the debate. So it's much like taking the council process and moving it to executive. I think that makes us more accountable and more transparent, which will lead to better decision making and I think more faith from the public in our decision making. So I'd ask for council's concurrence and believe we can sort through this together. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc. Councillor LeBlanc requires a seconder on his motion.
Hawkins.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Prior to turning this over to council for debate, I'm going to ask the city clerk to speak to the motion.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I have no comments to make at this time, but I'm happy to answer any questions that members may have.
Thank you very much. Members of council, the floor is yours. Councillor Stabenchuk.
I concede to Councillor Hawkins since he did second the motion, or no, that doesn't matter, does it?
Councillor Stadenchuk, nope, I actually called the roll call and it's you.
My brain is a little bit foggy. Okay, thank you. I have a couple of questions, and so this will likely be for the clerk. And that is, in the opinion of the clerk, how different would this create the agenda and change how we currently compose the agenda? It would just, would it be that much onerous, or it's just a question of, instead of automatically putting something into a private session of council, it would be on the agenda without as much information for consideration until it is moved into private agenda. I'm just wondering if you would comment on that. How different would it be in terms of how the agendas are crafted now?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it would definitely, there's a few implications. It would depend, I suppose, on the subject matter at hand. But as far as difficulty as to how it gets put onto the agenda, that wouldn't be a problem, by the way that we'd have to change that if council so desires. The one thing that I would probably caution, though, as council does make their decision on this, is that, as I had just stated, depending upon some of the subject matters, there would probably be some implications that would need to be considered as to how that information would be placed on the meeting agenda. I would defer to the interim city manager in the event that there's anything additional that he'd have to share on this, based on the fact that he was residing in the clerk position previously to me.
Mr. Nicol?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Masters, and with respect to your question, Councillor Stadenchuk. Logistically, of course, it can be done. The challenge may be, as Councillor LeBlanc was describing it, was that, well, there might be occasion when administration had additional information that it wished to raise in private and therefore would not be part of the public distributed agenda. I can foresee a problem if 6 members of council or a larger majority did not accept administration's recommendation to go in camera. Then what would happen? Because then you may be making a decision that you do not have the full understanding of the implications. So, I mean, that is just a logistical procedural matter, is that if you felt strongly that you didn't want to go in camera, you do run the risk of making a decision that might impact the city negatively in a number of ways. But it's potentially on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to reserve comments at this time. I do want to hear from other councillors in terms of their views of this. So that's all I'm going to say for now. Thank you.
Councillor Stadenchuk, before you sign off, you have only one opportunity to speak at council. So if you have comments, you're okay with that? Okay, just
yes,
wanted to
I'm
check.
okay. I am leaning. I am somewhat supportive of this, but I still want to hear a few more speakers. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Stadenchuk. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, through the chair. By way of comment, I think it's important to emphasize that in terms of all of the reports and items that we read and go through, a slim fraction of that starts in private. I think that needs to be said publicly. There might be the impression out there that we're constantly making decisions and reviewing a bulk of our items in private. That is not correct. I do support, however, the push towards more transparency. I have a question for either the mover or administration in terms of how we would manage something in real terms. So for instance, this isn't a big surprise, but if we're dealing with labor relations, bargaining mandates as an example, there's good reason to handle that in private. I just wanted some clarity on how this would work. So based on your objective here, Councillor LeBlanc, in the public agenda, it might itemize bargaining update or bargaining mandate. It wouldn't be accompanied by a public report, but when we get to that item on the agenda, we would then have to have a discussion based on administration's guidance on whether or not we would then vote to go into private session. And that could go different ways. And then we would have all of the information for us to discuss. Is that a fair interpretation of how this would work on a private item?
Mayor Masters, if I may.
Please go ahead, Councillor LeBlanc.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Councillor Stevens. Is they would say, we're discussing a labor relations update, and then in public executive, they would say, we think this is commercially sensitive. We think someone should move a motion to review that in private. I think Mr. Nicol, the acting city manager, was characteristically fair in responding and saying there might be some complications to this suggestion. So you could imagine a situation where we don't receive a written bargaining update ahead of time. We say we should discuss the bargaining update in private. Some members want a written document. Maybe that leads to some delay in us receiving that update. So it might mean we move a little bit slower. I think that is one of the complexities of this increased move toward transparency. But I do think that is functionally how it would happen. That's right.
Thank you.
And one, sorry if I may, fundamental shift is then in the model I'm proposing, it takes 6 votes to move it in private, whereas now it takes 6 votes to move it public. There's a bit of a change presumption, but I think you're right on that.
Okay, thank you. For administration, let's say we're dealing with this example of the bargaining mandate. Would it be possible, given if this passes, for administration to provide us with a confidential memo that is effectively a report that you do not wish to disclose publicly, and so we can actually be prepared for that meeting in advance? And then if we decide to progress to a private meeting, we would already have that information. Do you see that as a possibility, or is there some serious issues with how we manage an agenda?
Mr. Nicol.
Thank you, Mayor Masters. And with respect to your question, Councillor Stevens, and I think the interim city clerk and I would be on the same page on this. You have to be very careful distributing confidential memos, whether there be through the mail or by email, because council members are held to an oath of confidentiality when we are in a private meeting. It's very clear in the procedure bylaws that the information that you receive in a duly constituted private session is to be kept until such time there is a decision made to make that decision in public. Again, without questioning anyone's integrity, sending memos out can be dangerous. People can inadvertently send that email off to someone, or they just let their guard down. Does not mean it's an insurmountable challenge, but from a governance perspective, keeping things on a formally constituted agenda would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have right now. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to say, first of all, I agree with everything that's been said to date. I want to add 2 important principles. One is that I think we all agree, and it's been stressed by over the last 2 years in this council and in the last council, that the business of the public should be done in public. So this is not really a debate about whether or not we're going to be transparent. This is a debate about how to deal with difficult circumstances. The second thing is, and I think it's important to say this to the public, of all levels of government in this country, I believe that municipal governments are the most transparent by some very large measure. I think that this motion really breaks very little new ground. It's been mentioned that the matters may appear on the agenda that wouldn't have appeared before, and I'll come back to that. But I think what this motion really does is it provides an education to us as councillors elected to do the business of the public in the public, unless there's very good reason to do otherwise. And secondly, an education for the media and the public about how we're doing our business. And I think for that reason, it's useful. I finally want to mention that there are a number of limitations here that are important. The first is, and in some ways it comes to Councillor Stevens' point, when a matter that is potentially to be dealt with in private appears on the agenda, it will be worded on the agenda in a way that doesn't jeopardize the private nature of the issue. So, for example, on a collective bargaining matter, the agenda item might just say a labor relations issue. So there'll be a degree of generality which will not compromise what should properly be private. Secondly, there are very clear and accepted categories about what should be private, and they're not insignificant. So contract matters, legal matters, personnel matters, matters like labor relations matters and others that are in negotiation, matters that involve public safety, where there's sensitive information at hand, so that there are a large number of categories that are fairly straightforward that identify themselves as being dealt at least principally at the outset in private. Finally, nothing in this motion prevents members of council from receiving from the administration general background information on issues, general background information on day-to-day matters, briefings, from holding general strategic meetings like strategic planning conferences, because none of those matters are matters for the agenda, that are on the agenda. In other words, there's a distinction between issues which are potentially on the agenda and just general information that's given as backgrounds. There's no reason to think that that distinction, which is important, will be abused by this motion. At these kind of background briefings, first of all, attendance is not compulsory. Secondly, there is no record of the meeting. And thirdly, and most importantly, as we've seen in other contexts, no decisions are being taken. So in many respects, I review this motion simply as a codification of existing practice, and I don't think it will be abused. And I think it will help all of us understand that the general foundational principle is one of transparency. And those are the reasons why I'm supporting this motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Mancinelli.
I didn't think it was possible to both agree with a person and end up coming to the different decision from it. I respect Councillor Hawkins' points made. I think they were well made. Looking over this matter, I too want to make decisions in public realm, not in private. I owe it to the people I represent. I think it's my responsibility to do that. Having said that, I also appreciate having a moment to digest and understand the decision I'm about to be making in a public realm. And with my background, I need that time sometimes. And I think administration has used their judgment quite adequately throughout my term as a councillor to provide me with a little bit of a heads up in a private manner this way to date. I agree with Councillor Stevens. A very slim majority of all the decisions and matters we discuss ever come up in private first. I don't think it's an abused authority by administration. And I can't support this motion for the simple fact that it calls into question the transparency of my time on council to date. I haven't made decisions in private. I haven't tried to hide things from people. I believe in open government. If I say yes to this, even especially since it doesn't increase any real powers as described by Councillor Hawkins, I'm basically agreeing that there's been a problem to date, and I don't believe there has been. So for those reasons, I'm not going to support the motion. I do support the intention, and I can appreciate their perspective, and I applaud it, and I believe that municipal government should be transparent as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Mancinelli. Councillor Zakidniak.
So I'm going to support this motion, and I think to me what this motion is trying to accomplish is putting the onus on us as elected officials to determine whether something should be discussed privately or not. I think that's a fair responsibility for us to shoulder. And although there's much more to the motion, I think that's just an attempt by Councillor LeBlanc to clarify how this new process would work. But the major change that I see is just that the decision on whether something should be discussed privately or not rests on the shoulders of us as elected officials who need to answer to the residents of Regina in the election process. So I support that, and I think that is aligned with the policy in relation to how these matters should be discussed. I think that it is, in practice, will potentially be a small change, but I think it's an important one. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Zakidniak. Perhaps other council members will go, seeing no other hands here. I have some questions. You might need to time me. Currently, right now, and I'm going to ask the acting city manager, as he has a number of years, I won't say how many, perhaps Mr. Nicol, acting as city clerk for the city of Regina, as well as doing this type of work for the province. Currently, right now, and I just want to be clear, this motion applies to executive committee, which is also known as committee of the whole, in terms of a public agenda and a private agenda that currently gets released. Can we, when seeing an agenda as council or mayor, can we contact our fellow councils or our clerk's office to ask that, can we identify and flag something that's on the private agenda that should be put into public, Mr. Nicol?
Through you, Mayor. I think over my tenure, there have been a few occasions when I may have fielded a question as to why something was on the private agenda. And typically the response would be an explanation of its relevance or its connection back to the provisions under the LA FOIP legislation. And at that time, again, we would remind the member that the decision to put it on the private agenda was made for bona fide reasons. We do not, it's never been done during my tenure lightly. There's actually a bit of a pushback from the office of the city clerk back to administration to say, is this really necessary? And so typically we would come to an agreement, or there may be occasion when we would say, well, we don't agree with that. But again, we try to be it's always been a very judicious, deliberative decision as to whether something goes on the private agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Nicol. Where are decisions of council made?
All decisions of council have got to be made in this chamber with the cameras rolling and the public having free access. So I know it's been mentioned a few times by speakers this afternoon, but the Cities Act is explicitly clear that no decisions can be made without council doing so in the public realm.
Thank you. In the last 13 or 14 months, say, has anything been flagged by current council or myself as appearing on the private agenda that should be, in fact, sent to public without ever appearing in private?
Through you, Mayor, to my recollection, there has been nothing explicit in that. There may have been a comment made about, perhaps this could have been discussed in public, maybe. But again, that depends on an individual member of council's sometimes perception or understanding of the depth and the implications of the decision or the information before them.
Thank you. Speaking of the information before them, as I understand it, or as has been explained in the last number of minutes, is how do we get information for an item that you know for a fact needs to be in private because it deals with perhaps a personnel issue, a negotiation issue, a policy procedure issue, which is covered by LA FOIP? How would we possibly get that information prior to appearing at council? Or is this information that would be withheld and then walked on once we agreed to go into private? Not that we could have an open debate about what needed to happen in private, but it would be walked on and council would actually not have days of deliberative work that they could undertake in order to understand the issue to be discussed in private?
Through you, Mayor, with respect to that question, I think at first blush the way you have described that would be accurate. I believe as Councillor Hawkins commented in his remarks that a potential report title on the agenda may be something that's relatively benign or innocuous, and council would not necessarily have had the information in front of them until we went in camera, which then goes against council's stated wishes in terms of past debates about needing information beforehand to make informed decisions. So it does, in my opinion, cut both ways, that you may find yourself coming back into a public session with little or nothing to say or little or nothing to share with the public.
Thank you, Mr. Nicol. What does the current bylaw say as to who sets the agenda?
The agenda is set by the office of the city clerk. I can find a specific reference to that. You just bear with me. Section 9, subsection 1.1, the city clerk shall prepare the agenda for all regular and special meetings of city council and committees. And in my 15 odd years of service here at the city, the clerk's office has always prepared the agenda. And that largely comes from 2 or 3 things. One is just the regular business that has to come about, and that is through certain annual decisions that are made, reporting requirements, the budget, bylaws, etc. Some of those come from inquiries or motions that are instigated by members of the public. And then we also have notices of motion from council. So that is all put into a hopper, so to speak, and then the office of the city clerk, in consultation with the city manager, determines and prepares an appropriate agenda based on the timelines.
Thank you. Is there a reason for that is in place? Is there a rationale for, and you may not know, sir, and I apologize, Mr. Nicol, if you don't, but is there a reason why the city clerk would set the agenda?
Through you, Mayor, while there is no explicit policy or historical precedent that I can find, I would respectfully suggest that that is largely due to the fact that the members of council are 11 individually elected members, and the agenda for council as a whole is one that administration and the office of the clerk is charged with pulling together. I think if you had it otherwise, you may run the risk, and I emphasize you may run the risk, of individual councillors wanting to interject or involve themselves in the setting of the agenda and when something's coming and which document should be heard and which shouldn't be. And again, in the municipal system of government where you're all individually elected members, we treat you all the same with respect to that, and there really is no interference allowed. There may be an inquiry sometimes my office has received from a member of council who has said, you know, I have to be away that day for whatever reason. Might we be able to defer that to a future meeting? Or I know there are 3 people who wish to speak as delegations and they're away. And again, if it doesn't have a huge negative impact on timing, we would accommodate that. But members of council do not directly involve themselves in the setting of the agenda or the priorities in which we put the order.
Thank you. It's an excellent segue for my next question. Is it possible that council or myself could possibly understand the implications or the ramifications of putting things on public agendas that do need to be held in private without actually being involved completely within administration itself?
Through you, Mayor, I would respectfully say that it would be a challenge. If councillors outside of yourself are less than full-time, and you don't necessarily have the time or the inclination or the ability to involve yourselves in some of the implications and negotiations that are going on out there, whether that would be with proprietary business interests or potential negotiations with the province or the federal government, certainly with respect to labor relations. This is a complex organization. And so we go in private session to be able to explain some of those implications that are protected under LA FOIP legislation to give you a better understanding so that when you do come back before the cameras and the public and have to make a public decision, you're doing so from full information, not with certain pieces missing or misunderstood.
Thank you. And without putting you on the spot too much, in terms of the Local Authority of Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, LA FOIP, as it's often called, what are some of the matters that, or what are the matters that end up on the private agenda? Could you provide some examples?
Sure. Well, for example, labor relations, negotiations with respect to collective agreements. Perhaps something that a policy development that council is still wrapping its head around in terms of how is it going to implement it, should it, what would those implications be, etc. Anything to do with the commercial interests, something of contract negotiations with respect to the construction of a new building or something. Again, it's to protect the interests of the city and something that would protect our proprietary interests. We do not discuss personnel matters in public. Very few organizations do. What we are doing, I really want to emphasize, is not much different than other organizations would do to operate. But again, we do so under the clear authority of both the Cities Act and the LA FOIP legislation. And we have always been very, very judicious in how we interpret and apply those authorities that allow us to meet in private.
Thank you, Mr. Nicol. Items placed on a private committee meeting agenda. If in committee, in private, we are the view that an agenda item should not be considered in private, does the committee of council have an option to not hear it in private?
Through you, Mayor Masters, yes. A matter that is being discussed in a private meeting of executive committee, the committee can actually make a recommendation to, as outlined in Schedule A of the procedure bylaw, it can be referred directly to council. It can be directed that it be placed on a future public agenda of the committee, or it can request that the city manager withdraw the matter. And again, it's not my place to enter the debate. So I want to be very respectful when I say this particular matter. But in Schedule A, the statement of policy that guides us in terms of how we kind of balance the Cities Act and LA FOIP, Section 5 reads, and I'll quote it, should the committee, while meeting in private, be of a view that a particular agenda item ought not to be considered in private, the committee can do the following, which I just outlined. And the point I want to make there, again, without entering the debate, is this is written to say, should the committee, while meeting in private, it assumes it will meet in private on occasion. And the safeguard is those 3 points that I mentioned, that members in private could then vote to either direct it to go to council directly, send it to the public meeting of the committee, or have the city manager withdraw it.
Thank you, Mr. Nicol. I'm just going to come right out and ask the question. Have you evidence of abuse of this particular, the issue of items on a private agenda? Do you have an example of abuse of the issue?
Through you, Mayor Masters, no, I think I can comfortably say I don't believe it has been abused. I think there have been some tough discussions sometimes between the Office of the Clerk and administration as to whether something that has been proposed to be discussed in private actually needs to be discussed in private. And I've also said to members of administration in my former role when they were asking if something could be discussed in private, if something is uncomfortable, because I think, well, you know, this is just an uncomfortable issue, that is not a criteria under LA FOIP. So sometimes people think that they can use the private session of an executive committee meeting to avoid what I'm terming uncomfortable decisions. That's not on. It has to meet one of those specific criteria.
Thank you. And that's the procedure bylaw of the City of Regina, correct?
Yes.
Is there anything in the Cities Act that trumps our procedure bylaw?
The Cities Act is what gives us authority to meet in private under sections 16 and 17 of the LA FOIP. So legislation would trump our procedure bylaw, but our procedure bylaw is written to comply with the guidance of the Cities Act. Specifically, section 55 of the Cities Act says we must have a procedure bylaw, and it outlines a whole number of things. And it also makes reference to the fact that, yes, all meetings are to be held in public, However, and then it lists the sequence of events where you can meet in private, owing to either LA FOIP provisions, or it explicitly states strategic planning as an example.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nicol. Apologies for putting you on the spot there. I will not be supporting the motion, and I will appreciate both Councillor Hawkins and Councillor Stevens, who made note that it is not correct by presentation of this motion to assume that decisions are being made and I believe the word is secretive. I think the motion as it's written using that language is unfair, it's inaccurate, and it's misleading. And I appreciate both Councillor Stevens and Councillor Hawkins pointing out that all decisions of council are made in public. I believe Councillor Zakiniak referenced that we're ultimately responsible to the public. Our decisions, which can only happen in public, are an answer to the people. This presumption that elected officials could possibly know in the seats that we sit in, the workings from within administration is problematic to me. And I think it's operational issues, as outlined by some of Mr. Nicol's answers, we could not possibly know, and they should not be debated in public. I do not believe there's been a threshold that's been met here for a change. There's apparently no misuse. We have options for how to push things out of private into public. And I don't see how we get properly informed through a confidential memo, which I believe was the ask of Councillor Stevens, which is frankly just a wiggle room around having a private agenda and having reports coming to us in private for clearly things that need to be discussed in private and are covered well within the Cities Act and our procedure bylaw. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you. Had 3 seconds left. Thank you. Councillor Shaw, you're up.
I don't think I need a timer. A question further to that. Now, we talked about how this could possibly make things move slower. I'd like to ask administration, maybe Mr. Nicol, what would be the implications? And I'm thinking of a couple things since I've been on council, the implications of things moving slower when it comes to land and property and business, through the chair.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw, through the mayor. Again, the timing of a lot of this or the speed at which things are dealt with to some extent lies with council. So if you end up in a situation whereby you move to go in private, for example, but you don't have the information, then you come back out in public and you're still looking for information. I mean, again, depending on it's a one-off situation. I mean, I can't speak with any certainty with respect to all potential issues, but you do run the risk of things being dragged out a little bit. But again, I also would suggest that may not necessarily be a bad thing. You are a board of directors of a large municipal corporation, and you should be, taking the time to completely discuss things. But again, there's always the risk that delays may have negative impacts on other decisions or decisions that affect other players, keeping in mind that in fairness, a hasty decision can also provide negative consequences.
Absolutely. Just one further question to that. Now, we talked about the implications of businesses, and I'm just going to kind of go on an example, and maybe you can help me with this. And I'm thinking back to my other times, my other businesses that I had. If two businesses are competing for something, and we are not held in private to be discussing the two, can you talk a bit about the implications of something like that happening with this going forward, to the chair?
Sure, through you, Mayor Masters. I guess the best example I might use, Councillor Shaw, would be the long-standing parliamentary practice that budget information is not released publicly until the Minister of Finance stands in his or her chair and publicly releases the documents. Because that allows people to, it's not insider trading, but it's inside information. So, and when you're dealing with negotiations which may affect one or more parties, or, you know, the city, for example, might be considering a particular development somewhere. Well, that's not something that you would initially be discussing in public, or everybody who has an interest in the land is going to buy it up and drive the price up. And that's an example of where it would negatively impact the proprietary interests of the city of Regina.
Thank you, Mr. Nickel. That's exactly where I was going as a mortgage broker. I'm really concerned about this. We talk about, and it's wordsmithing here, more transparency if we don't support this. Absolutely not the case whatsoever. We know we're transparent. We know the people in our community know that we are. And I'm going to give an example. We use the analogy towards if we're not inclusive, if we don't have delegates given written submissions before they appear at council. On that motion, I was the only one that voted against it. And then we all found out that with not having the information from our delegates in beforehand, we don't have the time to study, to look up the questions, to have the answers for the people when they come to us. All of a sudden, we changed that motion back to all of our delegates need to have written submissions. So once again, I was the one that did not support that. And this is something that is exactly along the same line. We can't afford to make this mistake and then change it in 3 months because things could go wrong in our community. I will not support this for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. I see no further comments or questions coming from council. Councillor LeBlanc, please close off debate. Sorry, I apologize, Councillor LeBlanc. Councillor Bresciani is she was a little slow on the trigger. Councillor Bresciani, before Councillor LeBlanc closes off debate, please proceed.
Sorry, I apologize. I thought my hand was up. So I would just add to this debate. You know, I absolutely, when I read this motion, I was absolutely disheartened. I know that as a council, transparency has been at the top. We have questioned it. We have said that, you know what, if we need to meet in private, we can. If we don't, we will meet in public. You know, when I think of the council colleagues around the room, as Councillor Mancinelli has indicated as well, we as elected officials, as politicians, however you want to see it, we have a different view. And the city clerk is the one that's non-biased and sets that agenda. And I think that when we look at that, we absolutely sit back and say, you know what, it's not up to me to dictate whether it's private or if it's public. When it comes on the agenda, then we can raise that question. Then we can voice our opinion why it should be or shouldn't be. I think it's very dangerous when we allow politicians to start creating agendas, when we feel that, because we know we all will not agree on everything. So I am happy with the status quo. I am disappointed that this even comes forward, because I think there is a piece, and I think Councillor Hawkins indicated that transparency has been paramount for us as council. Sometimes there's a gray area, but again, it comes back to the view and the lens of how we see it as politicians. And that's the gray area. But as a council, I believe we have used the piece where we can meet in camera when we need to, but you know, we also bring it out in public and talk about it. I'm not going to talk about performance. I'm not going to talk about negotiations. Those are things that need to be discussed in private. So I will not support this. I don't see the gain in this. I see that this is almost political, and I will not support this moving forward. Thank you. Leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Councillor LeBlanc, I believe that's council. Please close off debate.
Thank you. Mr. Nichols spoke about the judicious and sparing way in which he uses the power to make a matter private rather than public. I don't doubt that. I think the point is it's about principle, which is that only elected people should be making the decision of what to shield from public eyes. So my view is, judicious though he is, as a non-elected person, Mr. Nickel or whomever is in the deputy clerk role ought not to be performing that task. That's on us as elected individuals. Okay, a second comment that came up in relation to Mayor Masters' questioning is that members of council as non-specialists might not be able to understand what matters ought to be private and what ought to be public. That is, we may well discuss too many things in public. I think that concern is unfounded for two reasons. The first is we still benefit from administration's recommendations, as we do in many areas. We don't have many planners, but we make planning decisions based on what administration tells us. The second is, if we want to take a strictly sort of trade-based specialist perspective to this, is we have more lawyers on council than we do on ELT. And so if we're speaking privacy legislation, I just don't think that holds water. Third, Mr. Nickel had noted that a portion of Schedule A to our procedural bylaw contemplates council moving from private into public, and said that stood for the proposition that clearly then executive committee can move into private, and that supports not supporting this position. Direct members of council to sub 1 of Schedule A, which says all meetings of standing and special committees of the council shall be held openly and no person is to be excluded. Then sub 2 carves out exceptions. In that way, that closely parallels sub 14(1) and 2 of our bylaw. Same thing. These are presumptively open. If we want to close them, that's for council to do so. What I say to that is Schedule A does not support the proposition that the clerk or other administration get to decide what is private and what is public. That is not inherent in the idea of setting an agenda. Finally, I've heard some concern from colleagues that the motion includes some suggestion that we've acted improperly over past years, and that of course would apply to me over the past 14 months. I'm not trying to place blame, but it's not good enough for us to say we've been transparent enough. The point is, can we become more transparent without risking serious harm to the organization? And I say yes, and we do that through this motion. So to alleviate that concern of Councillor Mancinelli, what I'm recommending and suggesting to the clerk, or rather directing, if I may, is that we vote on resolutions 1 and 2 of this separately. So the first, indicating council will commit to more transparent decision-making, including fewer secret meetings. I think that is the one that's attracting the concern of, are we saying we've acted improperly in the past? I would like to vote that separately from the going forward one, laying out I think what Councillor Hawkins rightly said is the quite modest procedural confirmation or codification of what our procedure bylaw already says. So I would make that request to vote on 1 and 2 separately and look for support on both of those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc. Council, what's before you is the motion separated out into 2 points. Yeah, I do.
Mayor Masters, point of order.
Thank you.
So can we, I don't see the benefit in breaking it out. I think we should just vote on the motion itself as it's written.
Okay, then given your dissension, we'll call a vote on separating out the motion into points 1 and 2 into 2 separate votes. I'm just, give us a minute here. I'm going to need City Clerk to get something ready.
And I guess I just, the point is that it's, the one is threaded through two. The comment is privately discussed constantly throughout so I'll leave it there. I think we vote on the whole thing.
Thank you.
Masters, I have a point of order with respect to that.
Please go ahead, Councillor LeBlanc.
And that is under 21 sub 2 sub A of our procedure bylaw that indicates that where a motion contains two or more propositions, I say this does. And when a member so requires, I say I'm that member. Then council shall vote on each proposition separately. So the point of order I'm suggesting is this is not subject to a vote. It is by the bylaw subject to vote and the two separate propositions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc. One moment, please. Okay, Councillor Bresciani. City Clerk has checked the clause that Councillor LeBlanc is referring to, and he can separate it out. And to that end, what we are voting on we're just getting it loaded, guys.
So Mayor Masters, then I'll allow it, then I'll withdraw that. But my point was in all of the pieces that are threaded through A, B, and C, like B, there's a common thread of secrecy, and that is not it. Hidden from the public. That is not what we were doing. So that kind of goes back to that transparent and secret meetings. I was trying to.
Your Master's point of order, this is not a point of order Councillor Bresciani is making.
Councillor LeBlanc. Councillor Bresciani, you can make your point with your vote. If you disagree with what's before you in terms of language or otherwise, then vote accordingly.
Thank you.
Councillors Bresciani and Stanichuk, could you cast your vote for or against point number 1?
Okay. Through you, Mayor Masters, the vote to vote in favor of recommendation number 1, the vote was lost. Those members of council that voted in favor were Councillors Hawkins, Stadnichuk, Stevens, LeBlanc, and Zakidniak. Those members that voted against are Councillors Bresciani, Shaw, Findura, Mancinelli, Moll, and Mayor Masters.
Thank you. City Clerk, could you please pull the vote for item number 2?
Through you, Mayor Masters, the motion is lost. Those members of council that voted in favor were Councillors Hawkins, Stadnichuk, Stevens, LeBlanc, and Zakidniak. Those members that voted against were Councillors Bresciani, Shaw, Findura, Mancinelli, Mole, and Mayor Masters.
Thank you very much to the clerks. We will consider bylaw number 2022-6, the Housing Incentive Program Tax Exemption Bylaw 2022. I'll turn it over to Deputy Mayor LeBlanc to do the first reading of the bylaw.
Thank you. I move, seconded by Councillor Zahidniak, that bylaw 2022 sub 6 be introduced and read a first time.
Thank you. I'll ask the clerk to start the vote on the first reading.
Through you, Mayor Masters, first reading is carried unanimously. All members voted in favor.
Thank you to the clerk. I will ask Deputy Mayor LeBlanc, can you please do the second reading of the bylaw?
I move, seconded by Councillor Mancinelli, that bylaw 2022 sub 6 be read a second time.
Thank you. Does any member of council have any questions? Councillor Zakidniak.
Thanks. I'm just looking for a bit of background about why this bylaw is coming forward. I couldn't find a reference to that within the bylaw or the previous council agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Zakidniak. I believe Deb Bryden will speak to it, or Mr. Lacey, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Masters, maybe I will start, and then depending on where the questions go, we may seek Mr. Weary or Ms. Bryden's help in this. So this relates to the housing incentives policy, which council has approved and delegated the authority of that policy to administer to administration. And so one of the incentives in that policy for those properties that are deemed eligible under that policy do receive tax exemptions. Tax exemptions can only be approved by council. And so annually, the bylaw is brought forward basically providing those exemptions to those properties that have been approved under that policy. So that's why you see it before you here today without a report, as the policy and the administration of that policy and determining eligibility has previously been delegated to administration. And this is a necessary requirement with respect to providing those properties with property tax relief.
Great, thanks, that's sufficient, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zakidniak. Seeing no further questions from council, I would ask the clerk to start the vote on second reading.
Through you, Mayor Masters, second reading carries unanimously with all members of council voting in favor.
Thank you to the clerks. Deputy Mayor LeBlanc, can you please do consent for third reading of the bylaw?
I move, seconded by Councillor Mole, that council hereby consents to bylaw 2022 sub 6 go into third reading at this meeting.
Thank you. Can I ask the clerk to start the vote?
Through you, Mayor Masters, consent for third reading is carried unanimously.
Thank you to the clerks. Deputy Mayor LeBlanc, can you please do the third and final reading of the bylaw?
I move, seconded by Councillor Stadnichuk, that bylaw 2022 sub 6 be read a third time.
Thank you. I'll ask the clerk to start the vote.
Through you, Mayor Masters, the third and final reading carries unanimously with all members of council voting in favor.
Thank you to the clerks. We'll now pivot towards the city manager's report. We'll consider item CM22-4, which is a COVID-19 update. This is a verbal informational item and will require a motion to receive and file, but first I'll ask the city manager to please introduce the report.
Thank you, Mayor Masters. As members of council will recall, we had a full and dedicated discussion last Friday before you with respect to the lifting of COVID restrictions. So today's update will be relatively brief. On this past Monday, in alignment with the provincial public health orders, the City of Regina lifted the provincial proof of vaccination or negative test requirement at all our city facilities. And this provincial health order also mandated that masks would be worn in indoor public spaces until midnight on February 28th. This easing or lifting of restrictions is consistent with the most recent direction of Dr. Tam, the Chief Medical Officer of Canada. Dr. Tam released a statement last Friday stating that we are starting to see hopeful signs in this ongoing battle with COVID-19, as we have seen weekly reductions reported in most jurisdictions across Canada. Dr. Tam also indicated that Canada needs to find a more sustainable way to deal with this pandemic, as well as future variants of the virus. With vaccines that have become widely available and promising therapeutics starting to roll out, and with natural immunity levels higher in the wake of this massive wave of Omicron cases, Dr. Tam indicated that she is optimistic that we will find a better balance between fighting COVID and letting and encouraging people to return to their more normal lives. Dr. Tam emphasized that providing guidance and tools to support risk-based decision-making will continue to empower individuals, families, and communities to reduce their risks through personal protective practices that many people have been following. Saskatchewan, along with many of the other provinces, is starting to find more sustainable ways as well. As I mentioned, other provinces have been lifting restrictions continuing this week. The City of Regina is going to continue to encourage the public as well as our staff to continue to use the tools to keep themselves and their families safe while we return to more normal lives, either through continued wearing of masks, good hand hygiene, and other good hand hygiene or hygiene measures, including distancing measures. With that, Mayor, we are able to answer any questions that you may have. Ms. Folk is on the line with respect to any questions that may be with respect to the broader guidelines from Saskatchewan Health. And Mr. Chaudhry, our Director of People and Organizational Culture, is available for questions that may arise with respect to the impact and future actions affecting our employees.
Thank you, Mr. Nicol. Can I please have a mover for the report?
Shaw.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Can I have a seconder?
Bresciani.
Thank you. I'll open it up. Any members of council have any questions for administration? Thank you, Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, through the chair. The last point regarding the COVID restrictions, requirements, and employees, has a dialogue been started with the respective unions and representative organizations internally about what these restrictions or the lifting of these restrictions mean from an occupational health and safety standpoint?
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. I'm going to ask Mr. Chaudhry to take that question, as he is the lead on this for us with respect to discussions with our unions.
Through you, Mayor Masters, we're currently working through the risk assessments, so that way we can have a fulsome discussion with the unions, but we're looking to engage them in the upcoming week.
Thank you. If I could ask a follow-up through the chair, one of the three fundamental rights includes the right to know that kind of hazards that are presented to workers in the workplace, there is currently no public health data about COVID. So how do you balance the absence of information with the employer's responsibility under the occupational health and safety legislation?
Through you, Mayor Masters, we're looking to, so great question. We're looking to balance that with comfort. We're really going to take the approach of making sure that it's available for all employees should they wish to, and those that choose to follow or say continue with the current practices of wearing a mask or anything that's currently out there now, ensure that they're fully accepted in the workforce and not treated any differently.
Follow up to that. Sounds like you're treating this like a choice. Would you treat hard hat, steel-toed boots, and other PPE as a choice? Why is the mask and these requirements a choice, whereas others are required?
Through you, Mayor Masters, in terms of this one, in terms of the choices, because there isn't going to be the public health order necessarily mandating. So in terms of things, and in terms of the PPE, it is dependent on comfort for some degree for the masking in terms of different meetings and different settings and just overall shared spaces and interactions with individuals.
Thank you. Through the chair, the city, along with other large organizations, have committed to a Mission Zero policy. Will you be adhering to that principle when it comes to COVID and other transmissible diseases?
Through you, Mayor Masters, we will be striving towards it, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Stadnichuk.
Thank you, Mayor Masters. Through you, we're only getting data once a week from the province. How often is the city administration still going to be meeting with the medical health officer on a regular basis?
Mr. Nicol?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Councillor Stadnichuk. Yes, that's my understanding. Ms. Folk can weigh in on that if she has something else to add. But we will continue to have a regular meeting, and I think it's just prudent and constructive to do so over the next while. That may be 3, 4, or perhaps a few more weeks. Again, without that information coming as regularly as before, we sometimes find ourselves finding out things are catching up. And I think one of the objectives we have here with the City of Regina is to be able to pivot and adapt very quickly should there be a significant change.
Okay, thank you. That flows into a second question of mine, because I am somewhat concerned. Even though Dr. Tam did talk about reduced cases across the country, Saskatchewan was kind of late in terms of the when the Omicron wave hit us, and the hospitalization rate yesterday morning was 417, and I think on Friday, the report towards us was 300 and I can't remember 60 or something. So it does look like cases are increasing in the province, hospitalization cases. So in terms of pivoting, if it does continue to get worse, how will we pivot? Because we have already declared that the proof of vaccination is gone. Will we just maybe continue with masking longer?
Thank you, Mayor Masters. With respect to your question, Councillor Stadnichuk, yes, I mean, we also have regular meetings through our emergency management center. Again, we will be having ongoing discussions with our Sask Health representative here in Regina. Again, we are somewhat tied to the information that we receive because it is on an irregular basis. But when I say we can pivot, again, as administration can react very quickly, and then depending on what we needed to do, if that was to establish the masking mandate longer or other measures, we have the authority, and we would request that council would be convened on very short order to discuss and make any decisions that they wish to. And again, I can't speak in to any great length or with any expertise with respect to the numbers in hospitals, but I do believe that there was a caveat put on some of the information that I read earlier today that said that a good chunk of people that had been diagnosed with COVID had been diagnosed while they were hospitalized. They did not enter there's a term for it, and I can't think of it what it is right now, but they said that many of those people, and I think it was up to 30 or so percent, had actually been diagnosed once they were in hospital, which again speaks to the asymptomatic nature of this virus.
Yeah, and also how a community transmission is pretty rampant still. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stanichuk. Councillor Zakidniak.
Thank you. So I have, my first question is, how will we attempt to evaluate the repercussions of the recent decisions that we've made in relation to COVID? So there was 4 items, if I recall correctly, that we voted on. So what will we use to try and evaluate any repercussions to those decisions? Through the chair.
Mr. Nicol?
Thank you, Mayor Masters. With respect to your question, Councillor Zahidniak, I think it goes without saying that we will rely in 2 parts. One will be on the updated information that we get from the SHA, whether that would be keeping an eye on the hospital counts, vaccination rates, illnesses across the province, keeping in mind that I understand that Regina is one of the higher vaccinated municipalities in the province. And the second is that our own staff, through Mr. Chaudhry's office, will be carefully monitoring sick time usage, leaves like that, to see what impact, if any, it is having on us. I believe, and I would refer this to Mr. Chaudhry, that we have very relatively low absentee rates due to COVID illness, owing in large part to the measures that we've already implemented over the past 2 years. And I think that's part of the reason why we encourage the continued use of masks going forward, good hand hygiene, distancing where appropriate, keeping contacts to a minimum, etc. But again, I would ask Mr. Chaudhry if he has anything else to add to that.
Through the chair, nothing else to add. I think you captured it.
Okay, thanks. So in terms of these informal COVID updates that we are having right now at council meetings, what I would like to see in these updates is a summary of what we're hearing in the updates from provincial health officials, and a summary of what the Emergency Management Center, I believe, what conversations are happening through that in that area, a summary of the sick time usage from our employees. So that is, so I'm just looking at notes here. That's the kind of information that I think would be relevant for us to be updated on at our council meetings. Is that something that administration could accommodate in these updates?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I see no problem with that, Councillor Zahidniak. That makes eminently good sense to provide you with that information, both provincially and with respect to our own operations.
Thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Zakidniak. Councillor Shaw.
Sorry, I wasn't going to ask anything, but I just want a quick question here. So we no longer have the public health measures in place. We're no longer in a state of emergency. When, and now we keep asking for updates, when does this end? Do you foresee an end to this, through the chair?
Mr. Nicol?
Through you, Mayor Masters. Difficult for me to say as a non-medical professional, Councillor Shaw, as to when. I think we will take our cues from multiple sources. I think obviously there'll be a reliance on information and advice coming from Dr. Tam, as well as from Dr. Shahab. I think we will be continue to monitor this. I think certainly my recommendation, and I have spoken briefly with the mayor about this as well as Mr. Chaudhry. Yes, the mask mandate is being lifted at the end of this month, but it would be a prudent thing for us we will continue to encourage people to wear masks if they feel comfortable and where appropriate. There is no mandate to do so, but I think from a common sense perspective, there's going to be many people out in the community who will continue to wear masks, whether they go to the grocery store or are on an airplane or whatever, just because it makes them comfortable. And I think that as a society, that's what we're going to do. But for our part, in terms of, putting all of this to bed and getting back to whatever state of normal we perceive that to be, from a personal level, I think we're getting there. I think it's perhaps a bit early to say the game is won, because I think there's too much evidence over the past 2 years that every time someone declares victory, something else happens. But again, I think primarily we will rely on the medical advice that we receive, as well as an assessment of the situation as it's affecting both our employees and perhaps attendance at our city-owned facilities.
So that's what I want, some clarification on. We're not going to be taking, it's going to be from the medical staff to say this is what's going to happen. And I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Seeing no other questions from members of council, we have a motion moved and seconded on the floor. City clerks, could you please call the vote?
Sorry, Mayor Masters, just clarification on what I voted in favor. This is just to receive and file this report?
Simply a receive and file. Yes, Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Masters, the motion carries unanimously with all members voting in favor.
Thank you to the clerks. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Hawkins.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins, and a seconder.
Shaw.
Standichuk.
Okay, lots of seconders. I'm gonna let the clerk decide that one out. I'll call the question. Any opposed? Hearing none. Have an excellent evening, council.